Entitled Mum wanted my baby to trap her boyfriend. I've been sitting on this one for a while, and it was the tipping point that led to me going no contact with my entitled mum. A few years ago, after dropping out of college and having to move back in with my entitled mum, financial reasons stemming from my mother, I found out I was pregnant. 5 months pregnant, 19 and single. Scary, right? So I went to my mother and told her because I didn't really know what else to do. The first thing out of her mouth, verbatim, was, "Oh, this is perfect. Can I have it?" Obviously, I thought I heard her wrong, or that she was just screwing with me because, what? But no, I'd heard her perfectly. She went on about how she thought her new boyfriend was going to break up with her, and that since he was a widow, his wife and child had died in childbirth, he wouldn't leave her if she got pregnant. On the spot, she pitched this elaborately stupid plan of us hiding my pregnancy and then passing my baby off as her own, as if we didn't live in the same city as all our family. Basically, I told her she was crazy, and we went back and forth for a bit before she threw a full-blown tantrum, screaming about how ungrateful I was and why couldn't I just do this one thing for me. And she stormed off and locked herself in her room, where she promptly went on her phone and aired out my entire situation on Facebook. Well, within the hour, both sides of my family knew. My father, equally an entitled jerk but separated from my mother, showed up with his girlfriend at my door and informed me that they'd already set up an appointment for the following week with a local adoption agency, and that they knew I'd do the right thing, which I did by packing my stuff and couch hopping with friends for a bit until I got on my feet. This honestly wasn't the worst thing my entitled mum has ever done to me, but it was definitely the turning point to realizing I didn't want or trust her around myself or my child. Anyway, I haven't really talked to or seen either of my parents since, and now I have a charming 3-year-old boy and a lovely fiance, so life is much better. That is amazing to hear. Right, okay, fine. Is this the most stupid one so far? Oh, this is perfect. Can I have your baby? How about no, but for $1 million, yes. Now that didn't actually come into part of this story, but my question to you, OP, is for $1 million, would you have sold your baby? That has got to be tempting. I know I'd be tempted. In all seriousness, this is a weird story. I don't really know what your mum was actually thinking of this entire time. Do they want you to give your baby up so they could adopt it? I don't really understand what's going on. Like, both your parents are just mental. And overall, it's just great that you got out of there. As you can tell, I'm still quite confused. This honestly wasn't the worst thing my entitled mum has ever done to me. Right, so what's she done then? Apart from trying to steal your baby. Things are worse than that? I don't even want to know. I'm joking. I do. Make another post, please, OP. Let's carry on. My aunt stole my inheritance. Then karma struck, and her life fell apart. My aunt was one of 2 kids my grandparents had. My mother was the polar opposite to my aunt. She worked from the age of 12 in my grandfather's shop, never asked for anything, and eventually managed to start her own business. My aunt never held down a job until the age of 26. She was constantly stealing from her parents and was constantly in trouble. Despite this, my aunt was spoiled by my grandmother, and so were her kids. She had 3 kids from 3 different men, and her first husband was not one of them, if you know what I mean. It didn't matter what my aunt or her kids did, my grandmother would always jump to their defense. She never had time for my mum and her kids unless it was to get something from us. The only reason my mum would visit her was because she loved my grandfather. My grandfather passed away in 2004, and a few months after, my nan decided to write up a new will. My mother and my aunt were both present for it when she signed it, so they knew what was in it. It made it so that when she passed away, her home would be sold, and the money split 25% each to my mum and aunt, and the remaining 50% would go evenly to the grandkids. At the time, the home was worth more than £500,000, so it would be a nice little inheritance, but nothing life-changing. In 2010, my mum died after an accident and did not have a current will in place. As she no longer had her business and was renting a house, she didn't have anything of much monetary value. The only thing she was concerned about was what would be done at her funeral should she pass away. But she told me everything she wanted. The music, the flowers, the coffin colour, and even what people were to wear at the funeral. She wanted people to wear bright, warm colours. So when she passed, my aunt and nan took over all the arrangements and tried to undo all the things I told them. The songs were going to be songs I knew mum didn't like. The flowers were all the wrong colours, and they picked a hideous coffin. With the help of my siblings, we were able to change a few of the things back to what they were supposed to be. but the coffin couldn't be changed for some reason, and my nan refused to let people come dressed as clowns, so it was all black. It was frustrating. After the funeral, my nan had her will changed. My siblings and I were told by our aunt that she didn't have any involvement with the writing of the will, and our nan told us that she changed it so that mum's share would go to her kids instead. All good, we thought. After mum passed away, my nan just stopped talking about my mum. At first, we thought it was because she was still recovering from losing her daughter, but even 5 years after mum passed, she still wouldn't talk about her. Even if you brought up a story about my mum, Nan would very obviously try and change the subject, usually about how hard my aunt and her trashy kids had it. And if you went to talk about your own problems, she would somehow bring it back to my aunt. I'd suffered a mental breakdown after my mum's death, so you can imagine how much it hurt to hear, well, X has had it so much worse. In 2016, my nan passed away. She'd written down what she wanted to be done for her funeral, and it was basically all the same things that she'd picked out for my mum's funeral, even the music to be played. I don't know why she tried to have a dress rehearsal funeral using my mum as the stand-in, but it was obvious that that's what she was trying to do. So after a couple of months, our siblings and I were waiting to hear about the will reading, and my aunt kept telling me, oh, it will be another month before we can do the reading. I didn't mind. I wasn't fussed about the money, to be honest. But my oldest brother was hoping to use the money to pay for a honeymoon for him and his then fiancée, and my younger brother was about to start uni, so it would have been one heck of a help. Eventually, my dad bumped into the solicitor my grandmother had used to deal with her will, and asked what was happening. The solicitor let slip that the will had already been read, and that it left everything to my aunt. When my dad questioned this, the solicitor told him that my aunt had been present when the will was written, despite promising that she had nothing to do with it. When confronted, my aunt initially tried to deny, but eventually admitted to lying to all of us. She showed us the will, and it confirmed what we already knew. The house and all its contents were now my aunt's. This included my granddad's war medals he fought in the Second World War. When I told her that he'd promised them to me before he died, she said, well, unless you have it in writing, you will have nothing in this house. Anyway, I already gave them to Clive. My heart sank. Clive, not his real name obviously, was her eldest son, and the dictionary definition of a screw-up. He'd been in and out of prison for stealing and dealing drugs. I knew that the moment that idiot got his hands on my granddad's medals, they would have been sold off. We looked into taking her to court over the will, but everyone we spoke to said that we probably wouldn't get anything out of it. She immediately put the house up for sale at close to £750,000. She'd angered too many people in our town, so she was going to sell the house and move closer to her daughter, who lives in a big city. An offer was made on the house, and she put down a deposit on a house near the big city, and I thought that was that. Here's where karma comes into play. The people who wanted my nan's house had a survey done on the house to see if there were issues. And oh boy, there were. It turns out that the land the house was built on was way too soft for the type of house it was. And it was sinking. It sunk about 2 centimeters in the 40 plus years my nan and granddad had lived there. But the sinking was accelerating to 1 centimeter per year. This meant that within the next 3 years, the house would need some serious work or be knocked down. The new value of the house? Just £60,000. Therefore, the buyers immediately pulled out, having not even put down a deposit. She couldn't buy her new house, but still had to pay the deposit on it. And while this was happening, she let Clive move in with her into her house that she rented from the council. He wasn't allowed to live in any of the council houses because he'd trashed every single one he'd ever been given. Somebody reported this, and she was kicked out of her home. She was forced to move into my nan's old home as she couldn't live anywhere else. So there she is, living in a crumbling house with her idiot son and her partner. She was stuck there for 2 years. Every time I saw her, she'd try and start talking to me, and I would just ignore her and walk off. One time, as I was walking away, she screamed, "Your mother deserved to die for having a R-word like you," in the middle of a busy street. Someone reported her to the police, and she had an official warning from them and was ridiculed on Facebook. Every time I saw her after that, she looked more and more miserable. Eventually, she sold the house for something like £85,000 and moved in with her daughter in the big city. I lost contact with her and her kids after this. I thought karma had been issued. Oh, but karma still wasn't done with her. I bumped into one of her former friends, and she told me what happened after she left our town. She moved into her daughter's home, let's call her Sue, but they only had a 3-bedroom house and 3 kids. My aunt and her partner had to live in the smallest room in the house while my aunt looked for a job and a home to rent. Even with £85,000 cash, she couldn't afford a home anywhere. After about a month, my aunt's partner ran off after emptying her accounts. She was left stranded in Sue's house, not contributing anything because all the money she makes goes into bingo. Eventually, Sue and my aunt get into a screaming match, and my aunt says something along the lines of, "I should have aborted you." Sue immediately kicked her out of her house. So again, there's my aunt, in a city where she knows nobody, no money, no home, and the last bridge she had, a smouldering wreck. Last anyone has heard, she was living in a caravan in the roughest part of the city, and she can no longer work because she's suffering early onset arthritis and can no longer move her hands. I know I shouldn't get joy out of something like this happening to another person, but it does bring me some peace as to what happened. Wow, before we got into the end of that story, I was thinking, okay, that is some pretty good karma. I'm happy that everything seems to have evened itself out. And then there was another paragraph, and it kept going and going. And honestly, I loved every second of it. I mean, look, stealing someone's inheritance is one thing, but things like those war medals that have obviously been sold, you're never gonna get them back. Those are memories that have no price. You cannot put a price on them. They are so special to you, and they've gone. I mean, that, if anything, is worth all that karma alone. And look, I'll say this, karma is a but then again, so is your aunt. So it seems completely fair to me. Now, if you like stolen inheritance stories, you're gonna want to stay tuned because I've got another one for you. Mum wants me to sign over 250,000 beneficiary check. My dad passed away recently, and it came to light that he named me as one of the beneficiaries on his life insurance policy. My mum says that it was a mistake and that I'm not supposed to be a beneficiary, just her. She wants me to file for the money and sign the check over to her. I'm going to go through with it because she is my mum and blah blah whatever. But the insulting part is that my mum says I can keep $5,000 from it to throw my wedding. I only have $2,000 from my own money because my partner and I are kinda broke. Is she being entitled? Or am I? Or both of us? Okay, wow, this is one of the craziest posts I've ever read. OP couldn't possibly be less understanding of the situation. I don't want to be harsh, but that is the truth. But thankfully, there is an update which we're going to get straight into, and hopefully some sense has come into OP's head, or at least someone has told them what they really should be doing here. Oh boy, well, some updates are due. First of all, thank you all for your concern and comments in my first post. It was helpful to hear your perspective on the money, and it definitely changed my view of the whole situation. To recap quickly, my dad passed away and he named me as a beneficiary on his life insurance policy. My mum said it was a mistake and that I'm not supposed to be a beneficiary, just her. So she wants me and my brother to file for the money and then sign the check over to her. Now on the policy, my mum is named at 34% and my brother and I are named at 33%, and my younger sister is not named. It turns out that the policy was not made before my sister was born, which adds to the murkiness and confusion surrounding why my sister is not included. My guess is that my dad signed up for this policy and forgot my sister's social, thinking he'd just come back to it later and revise. But he never got around to it, I guess. He was bipolar and did things impulsively sometimes. I think this life insurance policy was one of them. Well, at least he had life insurance. Suggesting we slow down and talk about this policy more has made me the bad guy in the family. My mum and my brother think that I am being selfish. It's gotten so tense that we have to discuss things via email because everyone is getting so emotional about it. My mum continues to insist that he made a mistake. She writes, "When Dad took out this policy, his intention was for me, my mum, to have money to pay off the house, which is already paid off by the way, and have financial means to take care of the family. Dad would never ever intentionally exclude his youngest daughter from this scenario if his intentions were to split things between the family. I believe he completed the paperwork incorrectly because he didn't understand how to write the policy to support his intentions." I responded with a proposal. The three of us split the cost of my dad's medical bills for the past 2 years, of his illness, hospice care costs, and the funeral. After that is settled, my brother and I split our portions into 3 so that my sister gets a share. She does not like this proposal and passive-aggressively told me to not bother paying her back for the medical and funeral costs. I also get the sense that she is trying to guilt-trip me because she keeps saying that she can't afford to screen in her porch. I'm sure there'll be more updates. This feels long from over. Okay then, just as I was going to say with the first one really, I feel like with this story, you need to just get a lawyer involved. You need someone in the mixer who knows exactly what is going on and exactly what you can and can't do to stop your mum from getting away with this. I am glad though that my fears after the first post before this update are not going to come to fruition. I was very worried there that you were just going to sign over just because she's your mum and be done with it. But thankfully the people of Reddit have told you that that is not a good idea. And that is the beauty of Reddit and why I love the platform, because you do get the most genuine, helpful advice on the entirety of the internet from people who know a lot more than you. And look, I hold my hands up. I put myself in that situation too. A lot of times if I need to know some information that I can't just instantly find, I'll ask a question on Reddit and I'll get fantastic answers. However, with all that being said, as I said at the beginning, I would still get a lawyer involved to make sure that you're not conned out of an incredible amount of money. Entitled parent parks in my driveway. I own a house a couple houses down from a school, so this was bound to happen eventually. When it's time for the kids to go home, my street is lined bumper to bumper with parents to pick up their kids. The sidewalks are full of families who walk all the way to their cars. I often have to pick up balloons, snack packaging, old homework worksheets, and general garbage that the kids drop. If you're trying to get home around the time school lets out, there is no way you're going to be able to get there before the blockade the parents make is gone. This has been a problem the few years we've lived here. There's two places the kids let out. My street, which is a small cul-de-sac with the school at the top, and a main road that's open all the way down to a baseball park with a wider road to allow street parking and two-way driving. Obviously, if you can't find parking, the tiny residential road isn't the way to go. There are 3 cars at my home. My car, my roommate's car, and my husband's utility van, which he parks on the road to avoid blocking our roommate since she's frequently in and out. Fridays, today, I work from home. So when I finish work, I poke my head out the window to look at my fruit tree I have near my driveway. It's spring, I keep excitedly looking for blooms. And I notice a big white Buick SUV in the middle of my driveway, blocking both spots for my car, which my husband was using since I was home, and my roommate's spots. Honestly, why would you park in someone's driveway? So, on top of these entitled parents blocking up our small residential road, this person decided to take up a private residence's driveway. I got on the phone with the non-emergency police line and took pictures of the vehicle and plates. Then I got my husband's keys and backed his vehicle up to block the SUV into my driveway, and I waited. 50 minutes later, the mum, bug-eye sunglasses, big old diamonds on her jewelry, and wearing athleisure, and she comes around to hop in the driver's seat and smiles and waves at me, sitting on my steps. Honestly, she probably thought I was the homeowner's kid or something, as I'm in my early 20s, atypical for a homeowner. "Hi, hope you don't mind," she said. "You're trespassing. Why would you park in a private driveway?" "Sorry, I won't do it again. We were just leaving." She was being really dismissive and avoiding eye contact, despite taking the sunglasses off. "I don't care. You have no right to park on my property. I'm on the phone with the police." "It was just for a second. I was just picking up my daughter." "It doesn't matter. You don't live here. You don't park here." At this point, I realized the non-emergency police aren't going to pick up, so I hang up and decide to screw with her a bit. She got in her SUV and dismissively waved at me, so I got in my vehicle that was blocking her in and waited, pretending to still be on the phone. She starts trying to back out of my driveway because there was a little bit of a gap between my utility van and my neighbor's car, but it was definitely too small for this Buick. I'd like to point out that this vehicle has a scuffed front bumper, so I had a feeling she has no spatial awareness outside of her backup camera. Every time she backed up, I honked, still pretending to be on the phone. She tried again, I honked again. She looked at my grass, and I was about to start recalling her in case she tried to go through my front yard, and I honked again. If she kept trying to back out and hit my big utility van, she would certainly lose. She then gets out of her SUV and comes up to my van, recognizing that she can't do anything without making it far worse for herself. Her face was visibly patchy from the distress, and she asked again, "Are you really calling the police?" "Yes, you're illegally parked on my private property. That is illegal. I don't care if it's for 5 seconds. Don't frickin' do it. You don't live here." Her kid then got out of the car, and I decided that was enough. So I waited for her to get back in her SUV, and I parked my van back in its rightful spot, and I let her out. After that, I called the school and gave them the license plate number. Nothing would probably come of it, but I don't think she'll park in someone's driveway again anytime soon. I'll take the jerk points because there's a child involved, but you shouldn't put your child in situations like this anyways. And there we go, a classic entitled parent story to end this episode. Look, we've seen stories like this before, but I'll never understand, despite how many stories I read that are quite similar to this, why people do these sort of things and then why they think they can just get away with it when they're caught. Like, you've been caught, hold your hands up and say, yeah, you got me. That's my bad. I shouldn't have done that. Don't try and go on the grass. Don't try and bump into another car. It's just ridiculous, especially given the fact that your kid is in the passenger seat and you've just picked them up from school and they're the ones that are learning all these lessons and probably getting extremely embarrassed by your disgusting actions. Crazy lady accuses me of kidnapping my stepson. Tries to kidnap him from me. First, a little backstory. I am a mixed ethnicity individual. I've been confused for many races over the course of my 29 years on this planet, but I'm literally Caucasian and African American. Usually it can be figured out, but the difference with me is that my father is the Caucasian, so therefore my hair is straight. I'm originally from Texas and I'm usually confused for being Mexican, but now I live in Massachusetts and I've never had an issue with anyone concerning my race until this day. Also, I am married to a Caucasian woman who had a child before we married. His father is not in his life as much, and I took the responsibility because I love this woman and I love this little boy as if he were my own. He's 4 now, and I've been in his life since he was 1. Anyways, on to the story. My wife needed a few things from the grocery store, and she needed to run a few more errands. Now, usually she just goes and knocks things out herself because I'm asleep. I work nights. But this particular day, I happened to be awake and I offered to go for her. She works hard and does a lot, so I definitely felt it was necessary to do something for her so that she could just relax for the day. I took my son with me so that she could rest up and just take it easy, and it gave me time to spend with my son for some bonding. We completed all of the errands, which went smoothly, and then headed to the grocery store to finish up our day. My son, being a typical 4-year-old, was full of energy, running ahead of me, laughing and speaking to everyone he comes across, which I generally don't mind as long as he doesn't hit anyone and stays within eye view. As I'm making my way down an aisle looking for canned corn, my son jogs to the end of it when an older lady is entering at the other end. My son, being the sweet social butterfly he is, approached and exclaims an excited, "Hi, me 4 and me Ryan." Bless his little heart. The lady looked down and says, "Well, hello there. You shouldn't be running around unattended. Let's go and find your parents." I didn't think anything of her statement because I assumed she just hadn't seen me. "Ryan, come back here, bud, please." He excitedly runs back towards me and starts turning in circles because, you know, he's 4. I'm still searching the shelves as the lady walks past me and stops behind me. Again, I think nothing of it because it's a grocery store and you have to share the aisles. I turn my basket around and start to walk towards the front cash registers when this lady literally blocks my path. I say excuse me and try to walk around her, and she moves her car in front of me again. I honestly thought that she was just getting confused and said excuse me once again and tried one more time to go around, but she just blocks my path. The following convo ensues. Sorry about that. We'll get out of your way," I say. "Oh, I don't think so. You're not going anywhere with that child." "What? You mean my son?" "That's not your child. He's white and you're Mexican. You probably didn't even know his name until he said it to me." "Yeah, sure, whatever, lady. Can you just move? My wife's at home and is anxiously waiting for us." "Stop your lies. You're not taking him anywhere, you perverts." Sorry to interject here, guys, but that is just a really, really interesting, and by interesting, I mean weird and strange claim, isn't it? That a man with a child has to be a pervert. Let's carry on. Now, this whole time, my son is standing close to me, holding my leg because he was honestly getting scared. I was getting angry as I hadn't had much sleep, and I have a short fuse anyway, thanks Dad. As you can see, he's standing close to me because he trusts me, and you're scaring him. So how about you buzz off? "No, he's scared because of you. He just doesn't know how to express it yet." She looks at my son. "Come on now, sweetie. I'm here to rescue you. Come with me." Thankfully, my son was able to communicate to her that he wasn't going anywhere with her, but she was having none of it. She literally grabbed my son and began to run. It caught me off guard. I honestly couldn't fathom what was actually happening. My son starts screaming loudly because he was so scared. And this lady is just like, "Don't worry, sweetie. He won't hurt you. I promise." Suddenly, I snap back into reality and I begin to chase after this crazy witch. While running through the store, I yell for people to stop her and that she is literally kidnapping my son. Thankfully, a worker stops her before she makes the exits. Why are you stopping me? This Mexican here is trying to kidnap my grandson. What? My son is literally bawling his eyes out and extending his arms, calling out for me. This lady was relentless though and wouldn't let go of my son, even after he slapped her face multiple times. I laughed a little, I'm not gonna lie. At this point, a manager shows up and asks what is going on. The lady spoke before me. She points at me. This pervert is trying to kidnap my grandson and I was just trying to escape. That's my son, you freaking psycho. Now let him go. The manager didn't know what to believe. I don't blame him. He was caught in a weird situation. So I pulled out my phone and showed him pictures of me and my son that dated a year or so back as proof. This lady would still not give up though and accuse me of faking them. Like, how would you do that exactly? I'll never know, but whatever. Sadly, there were 2 other ladies there taking the psycho's side, saying that I was attempting to kidnap my own son because there was no way we were family because of our different skin tones. One even called the police, which I was actually happy about because I knew that they'd be able to review the security cameras. Sorry, I have to jump in quickly here. First of all, it's ridiculous to think that you can't be a different skin tone to your child. Secondly, what about if you'd adopted, right? Or what about if you were the child's stepdad? Obviously, it could be a different skin tone. Ridiculous. You don't even have to be their dad. Could just be their guardian. Unbelievable. Despite all of this, I still called my wife to see if she could come to the store to get the situation cleared up quicker. As soon as I told her what was going on, she zoomed to the store. She got there about the same time as the police. So much for her easy day off then. The crazy ladies were giving their statement to the cops when my wife walked in. As soon as she walked in, my son goes, "Mama, help!" My wife is a true mama bear, and she immediately flew into a rage when she saw this lady holding my son. "Let him go now," my wife said. "Sorry, sweetie, I was just trying to protect him from this pervert over here." "Yeah, we saw him trying to kidnap him, but this lady saved him," said one of the other ladies. The cop looks at the lady and is confused. "Wait, what? I thought this was your grandson." "Yeah, I have no idea who that lady is," my wife said. She takes out her phone and shows the officer a picture of my mother-in-law. "Okay, I'm sorry, he's not my grandson, but I was only trying to protect him from this dirty pervert over here," the lady said. "Yeah, I witnessed the whole thing," the other lady backed her up. "He snatched that child and tried to run away with him, but this lady stopped it." And then the third lady even got involved. "Yes, I saw it too. He needs to be arrested. And you," pointed to my wife, "should be thankful that this lady was here to save your son because you obviously just let him loose wherever." Wow, now actually going after your wife too? My word. "Who are you talking about again?" my wife asked. All 3 crazy ladies pointed at me. "Oh, you mean my husband?" "Husband? Yeah, who do you think called me and got me here so fast?" I presented my ID to the officer and the manager, and my wife did the same. We also each showed pictures of us on our phones to prove that we really were a family. The cop nodded in approval and handed us our phones back and jotted down a few notes. The 3 ladies, for some reason, still kept trying to say this was all fake and that my wife was in on the kidnapping and said that we needed to be arrested. My wife just lost it at this point and let off some colourful words that I won't repeat here, but she definitely got her point across. Then the nail in the coffin came for the psycho trio. The officer turned to the manager and asked, "Sir, do the cameras work here?" "Yes, we have them inside and out." "Okay, great. Let's go review." The 3 ladies' faces went pale, like ghostly pale. The officer reviewed the outside camera as I pulled into the parking lot and saw me take my son out of my car. And then as I went up and down the aisles, and most importantly, the instant the woman snatched my son and began to run. Upon his return, he asks, "Would you like to press charges?" "Yes, I would," said the lady. "Why would I be asking you that question? Shut your mouth and sit down." He turns to me and repeats the question. "Absolutely," I say. Lady 1 was charged with attempted kidnapping, false imprisonment, providing a false police report, and child endangerment. The 2 others were also charged with providing a false police report as well. To make matters worse for the lady, my son bruises easily, and she left some terrible spots on him from where she was grasping him. But he's fine. This added a charge of child abuse to her rap sheet. I've caught later this year, but I'm not sure when it will be because of COVID. Guys, this story is from 3 years ago. The officer will be following up with me in a few weeks. And there we go. That concludes that unbelievably strange story. My one question throughout all of that, and it was whilst I was reading it, was just what are these women's intentions here? Maybe the two hanger-ons knew the first lady or saw what was going on but didn't see it from the off and were trying to take her side and back her up because they genuinely thought that what she said had happened had actually happened. But for the lady herself, what is she doing? Especially when she sees your wife. Yeah, she didn't know it was your wife, but she sees the mum come in and be pretty calm with you, OP, her husband. Why is she still then going on about this? I just don't understand from the off what her idea was. Maybe she genuinely did think that you were trying to kidnap this kid, but that's so ludicrous anyway for the points that I raised during reading. Don't really get it. Guys, if you have any idea, please enlighten me in the comments down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on a podcast platform, come over to YouTube and let me know your thoughts because I'm at a complete loss for words. Maybe she is just absolutely insane. And yeah, to be fair, the more that I think about it, that wouldn't be the first time that we've come across an insane person on this subreddit. Maybe I'm just looking for logic when there is none. Maybe that's just me. Moving on to our next entitled people story. I've upgraded to first class. Background. Airline captain, commuted to work, purchased a full fare first class ticket to get there. I lived in Atlanta at the time, domiciled in Houston, and commuted. Now normally you could get a jump seat in the cockpit, but on this auspicious day that was already taken. Pass riding wasn't an option because there were no seats in coach and only one in first. Pass riders can be bumped for fare paying passengers, and I needed to get to work. So I plunked down my credit card and I bought the last seat in first. Boarding has occurred and I'm peacefully in my seat, waiting for pushback. Out of nowhere, an entitled woman comes along. "You are sitting in my seat. You'll need to move right now." I do check my boarding pass and then say, "Nope. This is my seat. Not gonna happen. Sorry." "But you're an employee and you're sitting in my seat. Move now." "May I see your boarding pass?" Clearly there's been some mistake. "You may not see my boarding pass. I showed that when I boarded. I've upgraded to first class. Now move." "You'll need to resolve this with the flight crew. I'm a passenger." This entitled woman stomps off, resembling an irritated Dolores Umbridge, and returns with the flight attendant. "Good morning, Captain. May I see your boarding pass?" she asks. "Sure thing," and I show my boarding pass. "Mom, that's his seat. He paid for it." "Well then throw him off, dear. I've upgraded to first class, and that is now my seat." "I need to see your boarding pass, Mom." "You will not. I showed it when I boarded. I've upgraded to first class." "How did you upgrade to first class?" "I upgraded to first class. Look, I'm more important than an employee. Now get him out of my seat." Someone has called the cockpit by this point, and the captain has left the flight deck to come and deal with this. "Mom, I'm Captain Wallaby," not his real name. "I've just spoken with the gate agent. We certainly apologize for this awkward situation. The agent has corrected your paperwork and has a voucher for future travel for you as well. Please go and fetch your new boarding pass and your voucher and we'll be on our way." The entitled woman departs up the jetway with a triumphant smile on her face. The captain turns to the flight attendant and says, "Prepare the doors for departure." The doors close. The captain returns to the cockpit, and as we push back from the gate, I can see the entitled woman pounding on the glass next to the jetway. It was a nice ride to Houston. The coffee was wonderful. Right then. I'm not gonna lie, I did not expect that ending. Immediately my thoughts are, this sounds a little bit too good to be true. I mean, not gonna lie, it could be fake. Doesn't change the fact that I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Even if it's fictitious, I've loved every second of that, especially the ending. Ridiculous, but hey, comment down below guys. What do you think? Real or not? I want to know your thoughts. I mean, let's be honest, right? It does seem a little bit farcical that this happened, and it probably does go against some form of law, airline law. I don't know exactly, but I presume you can't. You know what? I'm saying this. I think that you can, right? If the pilot is saying, if the captain is saying, "I don't want this woman on my flight," it's his choice, isn't it? It's their choice. It's his plane. He's the one that's, putting everyone in a very dangerous situation, a life-threatening situation. Not threatening, but you get what I mean. Everyone's lives on that plane are in the captain's hands. Therefore, legally, it probably is his decision who flies. I mean, again, I don't know this, so I'm just kind of, saying what I think, guesstimating. Any one of you that do knows this or works on a plane, please do get involved in the comments down below. Clearly, I don't know myself. So therefore, he probably was within his rights to do this. And maybe this is not the first time that this has happened. And by this point, throughout the years of dealing with entitled women like this, he's just like, you know what? I'm done. I'm gonna do this for the memes. And I want to see her waving. And I want to see her smashing the glass as we're pulling away. And you know what I'm gonna do? Just gonna give her a cheeky little wink as I take off into the sunny sky. Mama Karen wants entitled brat to ring the bell because she deserves it. For those of you unfamiliar with a cancer ward or clinic where chemo is administered, and I pray you always will be, there is a little brass bell. This bell is a symbol of hope for all. It marks the end of treatments and the ringing in of the new chapter, hopefully cancer-free. For me, I vomited right before I rang the bell because the anxiety of the unknown was almost as bad as chemo itself. But that's another story. Today, it was Heather's real name. She gave me permission to ring the bell. Heather is a really lovely lady. She's 58 with stage 2 ovarian cancer. She had a hysterectomy followed by chemo. Heather's diagnosis is great, but she's had it rough. During the hysterectomy, she almost bled out due to undiagnosed complications. This left her hospitalized for over 3 weeks, delaying her treatment by over a month and left her fearing the worst. Heather really is the most lovely woman you could meet. She's the grandma everyone wants to have, but is kind of glad they don't. She's funny and loving, but can give you a look that makes you back away like you're staring down a hungry grizzly. Everyone that interacts with Heather loves her, and honestly, the woman saved my sanity on more than one occasion during my treatments. Another thing that may differ from ward to ward is the chemo room. Patients in ours sit in a little oval room that's like a giant lounge with comfy chairs and a little TV. There are drinks and biscuits off to one side and room enough for 10 patients and up to 2 visitors. As I was leaving my appointment, I saw Heather's daughter, who informed me today was the day. So I decided to stick around to see her ring the bell, and Reddit, I'm so glad I did. A couple of weeks ago, a new patient joined the group. We will call him Sam. Sam seems like a relatively nice older gentleman with an absolutely awful excuse of a daughter and grandchild. In the limited interactions I've had with these two entitled brats, I've seen the daughter stealing biscuits off people currently hooked up to chemo machines, and the mother screaming at nurses for reprimanding the child when she attempted to rip the cannulas out of a patient's arm. Wow. Genuinely no idea why they've not banned the mega monster and her little Braticus. Like I said, today it was Heather's turn though to ring the bell. Unlike some places where the bell is on the wall, our unit has a little old-fashioned wooden brass bell that the nurses keep behind the desk 90% of the time. Today, just as Heather was getting ready to hopefully walk out for the final time, the nurse brought the bell over to the little side table. At first, the little fallen angel didn't notice the bell. She was too busy attempting to crush the souls of the elderly and infirmed by playing her Switch. Not loud enough to be kicked out, but just loud enough to be annoying as all holy hellfire. But at least she was distracted. Once Heather was ready, the nurse stood by the little side table and made a short speech about Heather and her final day of the journey. Just as the speech was wrapping up, the tiny terror shot out of nowhere, almost knocking Heather to the ground. She reached up and grabbed the bell. Now Heather, being the no-nonsense, badass granny she is, took the bell out of baby Beelzebub's hands and firmly but gently said, "No honey, that isn't for you, it's not a toy." My god, did that unleash some kind of mythological demon, because the screech that child released at being told no was loud enough to shatter glass. She lunged at Heather, trying to grab the bell from her hand, while Mother thinks she's superior, stood up screaming. "You can't do that, she's an innocent child. What kind of disgusting woman takes a toy from an innocent child? You're a B word, C word, W word, etc. Give her back the bell, you don't need it, she deserves it more." It was a lot. It wasn't even a conversation. I'm pretty sure she just growled it all in one breath. The harpy screeches went on for about 30 seconds of just incomprehensible nonsense. Bertha Big Mac waddled her way over to Heather to take the bell from her, but Heather just did not have time for her shiz. Heather's got a bell to ring and a life to live. So as the rampaging rhino gets up to Heather, Heather goes heathen on her. She looks this entitled mama dead in the eye and says, "Your father must have been," insert the name of a certain World War II German political leader, "in a past life, to be lumped with such a sorry excuse for a daughter." Well, this took everyone by surprise, as there was a brief pause before Heather unleashed everything she'd been dying to say to this Cerberus. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to finish a round of treatment with you and your obnoxious brat around, making everyone's lives miserable? I know God's testing us, but my God, we already have cancer. Now he's saddling us with you too? You're disgusting. You're entitled, you're selfish, you're poorly behaved, and your child is just as awful as you are. And I hate saying that about an innocent child, but my God, she's awful. I've never hated a child until I met yours, but she's really, really awful. She's not been kicked out of school. Did I mention the kid is 10 years old because the teachers are targeting her? She's been kicked out of school because she's an entitled bully, just like her entitled mother. And if you want any hope of her having a decent life, you'd become a decent parent and correct some of her behavior. But oh no, that would require correcting yours, you abominable excuse for a human being. It was glorious, awful, awkward, and silent. Betty Big Mouth had suddenly been struck dumb. The tantruming terror was gaping like a fish out of water. And then there was Sam. Sam broke the silence when he started laughing, like deep belly, full-bodied laughter. Mama Hodai looked horrified, angry, mystified, and humiliated as her father laughed hysterically. To be fair, not sure any of us knew how to react. After what felt like an hour, but was likely about a minute, Sam stopped laughing and told his daughter and granddaughter, "You can sit down and shut up, or go wait in the car." He then told Heather to go ahead and ring the bell. The slain beast and her beastette slinked back to their seats, where they both sat shell-shocked, while Heather rang the bell. We clapped. Some of the cheap seats clapped a little too enthusiastically. Then Heather, her daughter, and I sauntered out of the room. Heather and I parted ways at the hospital entrance, and I wished her the world of luck. But I've got a feeling she won't need it. If you can slay 2 Karens in one 90-second rant, cancer is nothing. I love Heather, but my god, I'm so glad she isn't my grandma. I mean, to be honest, the only part about the story which I don't really agree with OP on is the fact that you're saying that you don't want Heather to be your grandma. Are you joking? She sounds unbelievable. I get what you're kind of saying slightly, I will say. You think that maybe she's a little bit too just like stern and sticks up for herself too much, perhaps, to the detriment of you as her granddaughter, maybe? You want to have a bit more fun? I don't know. I'm trying to give you the benefit of the doubt here. To be honest, she just sounds badass, as you said. Now, as for these entitled people, the fact that their own granddad, is laughing at them for a full minute is just mental. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I do not understand how one family can contain 2 sets of people that are just so different. You got Sam, absolute legend, who just laughs at his own entitled family members. Then you got, as you said, the beast and the beastettes. They were just disgusting individuals. I don't get it. I mean, seriously, ringing that bell after being told you are now cancer-free must be one of the most amazing moments in someone's life. And you're trying to take that away from them. It's nuts. But hey, fair play to Heather, not just for beating cancer, but for also beating entitled people. Now for our next entitled parent story. Entitled stepmonster got herself banned from my wedding. I am a 28-year-old man, and my stepmother, who is 49, is a wannabe party planner. She's taken it upon herself to plan and host every party and holiday my dad's family has thrown since she married him. I never loved those occasions growing up. She's controlling and gets upset if people complain about anything, but humoured her for my dad's sake. According to him, this helps her feel included. I'm getting married to my fiancée Jane in July. We got engaged in early 2021, but Jane ended up getting pregnant a couple of months after that, and we decided to postpone the wedding to focus on our son for a while. So we've had a long engagement. My stepmother has tried to hijack our wedding plans from day one, complaining, contacting our planner, showing up unannounced to Jane's dress appointments, and more, and we've repeatedly asked her to stop. Now Dad wants us to humour her again, but she's clearly resentful of the fact that she's not hosting the wedding or being labelled mother of the groom in invitations. Besides our baby boy, we also have Luke, who is a 4-year-old, Jane's paternal half-brother. She got custody of him a few months into our relationship after his parents died. I ended up moving in with them during the pandemic and have been in Luke's life since he was a baby. He doesn't call me dad and refers to us as his sister and his OP, but we love him like a son. Stepmother, though, hates Luke. Okay, sorry to interrupt, she hates a 4-year-old child. Crazy. Anyway, she accuses Jane of baby trapping her way into the family. That accusation only got worse after our son was born. My dad gets along with Jane and adores the kids, but stepmother demands him to refuse babysitting Luke, so we don't leave the kids with them often. Instead, Jane's brother and sister-in-law usually watch the kids for us, as their children are close to ours in age. We had a thing last Sunday, and my brother-in-law was out of town with his family. Jane's other siblings live in different cities, as well as my mum and sister. My dad agreed to babysit at our place, and we left. We came back to find both kids crying, stepmother screaming, and dad weakly trying to calm everyone down. Apparently, Luke had told Stepmother that both he and our son were going to be our ring bearers, and she went ballistic. At a 4-year-old, that is. She screamed that she wasn't going to allow that because he wasn't family. She then, unfortunately, got physical when he started crying. His lip is still split. She'd never gotten to this point before. Oh my. We immediately banned her from our house and from our wedding. Dad is fuming and has said he's not going without her. He's also convinced half of his side of the family, by severely downplaying what Stepmother did, to boycott the wedding as well. This includes my stepbrother, who fully agrees with his mother no matter how many times I try to tell him the truth. Me and Jane are refusing to budge, but many of my cousins who aren't coming anymore are asking us to reconsider. Pretty much all of Jane's family agrees with us, but one of her aunts has suggested that maybe Stepmother is acting out because she doesn't feel welcomed by my family. I've honestly had it with my family enabling her behavior. I love my dad and really want him at my wedding, but I'm more than willing to go no contact if it means protecting my family. Now guys, the good news is that there is an update to this post, so we will find out what happens next. However, I do have to say, just off the rip, the fact that some people in your family are defending your stepmother because she might feel left out of the family, that's a reason why she's abusing a 4-year-old. Like, what is going on there? Seriously, what's going on? And look, maybe it's just a split lip and that's not that deep. No, sorry, I disagree. A 4-year-old has been physically hurt and people are defending her. What is she doing? Now, that initial post was written 5 days ago, but just 5 hours ago, we got the following updates. I'll start off by saying that me and Jane are going no contact with my dad and stepmom. We haven't really spoken to either of them since the incident, and I don't plan on being the one to reach out. Any communication between us is being handled by my younger sister. She's completely on our side, but will remain in low contact for the time being. I've decided to adopt Jane's way of dealing with people she cares about. Forgive what's apologized for, but never forget. Basically, if dad or my stepmom ever truly understand what they did wrong and sincerely apologize, we are willing to forgive them, even if begrudgingly so. But we will never ignore or let them forget what they did to our family. And for the time being, neither of them will be allowed near Luke, our baby, and any other kids we may have in the future, even if we do forgive them. Well, I for one completely agree with all of that, and I'm happy to hear it. As for the rest of my family, I read a lot of comments suggesting that I post pictures of Luke's face, as well as the nanny cam footage. I'm not very active on social media, but even if I was, I'm not comfortable exposing my injured preschooler like that, especially given that nothing on the internet ever truly goes away. I also decided not to share the pictures with my family unless truly necessary. I should probably mention that while my family adores my dad, most of them aren't very fond of my stepmom. She had 2 failed marriages prior to meeting my father, the first of which resulted in my stepbrother, and he cheated on his then girlfriend to be with her. My family loved that girlfriend and disliked my stepmom right away. Not only has she been controlling and manipulative since the beginning, she's also tried to force her way into the family matriarch role by any means possible. Taking over planning duties for every family event was her favourite way of doing it because of all the attention and compliments that come with it. The main reason why I hated these parties growing up was because she'd always find a way to make everything about her, including Christmas and mine and my sister's birthdays. The rest of the family felt neutral about it, but they never liked her. With Luke, it was different. Most of my relatives didn't meet him until COVID restrictions got looser, and by then he was 2 years old. He's a bright and genuinely lovable kid, and there weren't really any other small children in the family, so everyone immediately started cooing over him. The way I see it, my stepmom got upset that Jane and Luke were accepted by my family so easily compared to her experience, and that is why she resents them both. But I can't confirm that. She was also mad that, aside from not being the planner, she would have absolutely no involvement in the wedding party. She tried to pressure us into letting her officiate. One of Jane's best friends was offered that role a year ago, making stepbrother my best man. He wasn't interested and I'd already got on my best friend, or asking her sister's daughter to be our flower girl, but we'd promised Jane's 3-year-old niece. Also, her sister's daughter is 15 and doesn't know us. Sorry, that is so weird. Imagine just a random 15-year-old girl being like, yeah, let me just carry these flowers. Sorry, just got a funny image in my head. Anyway, she also tried to convince us to let my dad walk Jane down the aisle since her father's gone. but her eldest brother, the brother-in-law I mentioned in the first post, had already been enlisted. Okay, that one is crazy. My stepmom was disappointed that my family wasn't as involved in the wedding as Jane's, and kept making comments about how that would never happen if we put me in charge. All of that being said, there is nothing that can excuse being that awful to a child, especially if it really is the petty jealousy that I suspect. Because I haven't spoken with my father, my sister has been keeping me updated on what he's been up to. As I found out through her, the story my dad and stepmom told the rest of the family completely erases Luke's injury and the abuse charges. Oh yeah guys, OP left a really small edit on the first post saying that they actually were going to press charges on the stepmom for what she did to Luke, which is completely fair. It insinuates that me and Jane banned them because we got annoyed with my stepmom and decided to take it out on my dad as well. Because most people already dislike my stepmom, explaining what actually happened that night wasn't hard, and most of the relatives that I actually wanted at the wedding have apologized and are now berating my dad as well. The people that didn't believe us, as well as those saying we overreacted, have been told they are not welcome in our home anymore. Those are mostly people from my dad's generation, so I can't say I'm surprised. But the realization that they're so biased that they're willing to protect a woman they hate after she hurt a child just to make my dad happy has reassured me that I don't need any of them in my life. My stepbrother is still in denial. He refuses to believe his mother could hurt a child, even with all the evidence we have. I have to admit I understand. I love my mum too, but that doesn't mean I'd excuse his obliviousness. So he's banned too. It sucks because we were close growing up, but I don't regret it. Besides, Jane has 3 other siblings besides Luke, the older brother-in-law, a twin brother, and a younger sister, and I'm closer to them than I ever was with him. Speaking of Jane's family, they're all furious over what happened and have been extremely supportive of us. Jane's maternal family basically adopted Luke after she got custody of him, and have called frequently to make sure he's okay. We did manage to save some money with everybody we uninvited and have decided to use it to help Jane's cousin. She lives in a different country and was previously unable to come to the wedding, so we're paying for her plane ticket. That is awesome. Luke has gotten much better and is almost completely back to being the sunny child he's always been. The split lip was shallow. It's healing slowly but didn't require any stitches. We sat him down a few days ago and explained that my dad and stepmonster wouldn't be around anymore. He really liked my dad but understands that he and stepmom are attached at the hip. He's clearly scared of her, but we're doing our best to make him feel safe. That is so sad that a 4-year-old has that much terror in their lives. At that age, wow. Me and Jane have reassured him that he is family. We love him, and no one will ever change that. I'm not too worried about my dad or stepmom trying to show up at the wedding, but we've alerted the venue and given them pictures just in case they try anything. Better safe than sorry. Some people brought attention to the fact that my stepmom is a hypocrite for saying Luke isn't family. I agree, for obvious reasons. Her main excuse for pretty much everything she does is that she doesn't feel like my family welcomes her. Dad has been guilting me to take part in everything she plans by reminding us of that for as long as I can remember. The way he continues to make excuses for her without realizing this is basically a case of the pot calling the kettle black, except Luke actually is family. This is what has made me accept that while I will always love my dad, it's not healthy or safe for me and my family to be around him anymore. It hurts to know that my son won't have his only remaining bio-grandfather in his life, but he has 2 amazing step-grandpas to make up for it. For now, I'm sad but satisfied with how things have turned out. I don't like to complain about my life. It's a mess, but a beautiful one. I love my fiance, I love my kids, and I'm lucky enough to love my job. We're happy, and I'm not letting anyone ruin that. And there we go. Great story. Really enjoyed that one. You know what? I really like the fact that throughout this, you kept almost reminding us the reason as to why you were treating your dad in the same way you were treating your stepmom, alienating him from the family. Well, not alienating him, but you know what I mean. Going no contact. When he, to be fair, himself wasn't doing anything particularly badly. But yeah, you just summed it up at the end right there. The fact that he is enabling your stepmom's disgusting behavior, if anything, is just as bad as what your stepmom is doing, right? Now, OP has said that they hope that this is the last update on the story, but they'll keep us posted. It's one of those ones. I really, really hope that they do not show up at your wedding. But if they do, wow. It would make for some Reddit post. They called me a baby factory, so now they'll never see me again. I want to say first, I had a difficult childhood, but not because of them. I was a happy kid who had friends and was kinda adjusted, but we were poor. We jumped across the US about twice, and my siblings and father were all disabled in different ways. My youngest sibling and dad were hard of hearing, and my youngest sister had brain and back injuries due to Chiari malformation. Look it up, it's actually a very interesting disease. It's a condition where the lower part of the brain pushes down into the spinal canal. Well, I must say, that sounds truly terrible. But when things started really changing was when I was in high school, around my junior year of school. I met a dude and we were best friends, then we dated. Newsflash, he was a terrible person. It ended in me and my sister getting a restraining order against him, and both my siblings seeing and hearing things about me they should never have been exposed to. I graduated high school even though I probably shouldn't have with my grades. I'm pretty sure my teachers just pitied me. And then after like a month, I got diagnosed with ADHD, anxiety, and depression. Go figure, who could have guessed? I get on Adderall and it works great. For one day. Then it devolved into me having all-day panic attacks, vivid and extreme hallucinations, massive problems with an eating disorder, and an inability to control any emotion. It led me to backhanding my youngest sibling over a dispute involving the dishwasher that I still to this day would do anything to reverse if I could. I don't remember that 3 months or so period. I blocked out most of the memories because they were so mentally and emotionally taxing that just thinking about that makes me depressed. But at the time, I really thought that my parents were doing everything they could to help me through that time. They could have done more, but I reasoned they were working and didn't have all the time in the world to baby me, so I should handle this myself. Eventually, all by myself, I decided to go cold turkey and went through withdrawals which were almost as hellish as the actual meds themselves. Looking back now, I realized that the only way my parents could have been more hands off were if they'd packed their bags and moved out. They didn't talk to me about anything. They didn't help me keep track of symptoms. When I attacked my siblings, they didn't protect them from me or me from myself. Now as a 22-year-old on new meds, my doctor just within the last month looked at my old records and was appalled because they started me as an 18-year-old who was very new to meds and sensitive to them at a dose for grown adults well into their Adderall usage. She told me they started me off at around 25 milligrams when she normally prescribes around 5 to 10 for new users. So they didn't advocate for me at all during this mentally traumatic time immediately after being traumatized for almost a year. They took me to a therapist who noticed I was writing a story with an obvious self-insert and very influenced storylines from my day-to-day life. When she asked to see my drawings and everything, the next time my mother pulled me from therapy, saying something I still remember to this day. I didn't send you here so she could ask you about your stories. I sent you here so she can talk about how your ex messed you up. She's not doing this fast enough. Well, come the end of summer, and even though I was still struggling with leaving the house just for a Walmart trip, they sent me to school for college across the state and basically wiped their hands clean of me. I went into survival mode. I believed my parents were right and I needed this, so I did my best to fake it till I made it. I shouldn't have been there, but in the long run, it was what saved me. My friends I met there are some of the people who I've chosen as family, and I met my current fiance while there through friends. Funnily enough, I wasn't allowed off campus. Even though my parents lived about 2.5 hours away and wouldn't have known otherwise, it took convincing from one of my friends to go about 2 hours in another direction, and that's where I met my fiance. My parents really don't like Connor, but they did like the free labor he did for them and how mature he was to keep me in line for them. Now they could pawn off the driving around and emotions on him because they never bothered to teach me how to drive or get a job or regulate my emotions. Connor could do all of that quite well though, so they let him teach it to me. But whenever the idea of him got brought up as my boyfriend, they would clam up. They did not want me to date anyone, not after my ex. I thought it was them just worrying about me after a traumatic period, and I was grateful for it. Connor helped us move like 5 times. He did free things for my parents all the time, and he was nothing but respectful the entire time he's known them. But eventually they moved to the same city I was going to college in, and I was going through a hard patch again. COVID had hit at the end of my freshman year, and now they were living here in my college town, and I started half online school for my sophomore year. Living with my parents again was hell. I was used to, at this point, living in a dorm, and I wanted to come and go as I pleased. My friends got me rides, and I fought to get a job until one day I applied anyways and started working at a McDonald's. I was doing terribly in school. I didn't want to be in it anymore. Distance learning was difficult for me, and they weren't doing anything to help me. I was slowly becoming suicidal again, and I wanted nothing more than to find my own place. During this time, my dad was constantly working overtime, and one day when I was probably at my lowest, he made a joke that he was picking up all the overtime just to get away from you. I still remember it, clear as day. I was mentally declining and becoming more and more erratic as time passes because I was spiraling again, and they just sat by and watched it happen while continuously judging me, making backhanded comments as I did. All the way up to this point, I was not known for fashion or hygiene. I was constantly self-conscious and didn't have control of my ADHD, so I was never one to doll myself up. But me and Connor were going to go on a date, so I grabbed my prettiest dress, some tights, and my favourite flats and did my hair all nice, and I even tried makeup. I felt so pretty, and Connor was showering me with texts filled with compliments as he was on his way to pick me up. My mum and siblings got there first. My mum took one look at me and told me to go change. She burst out laughing and was hysterical over my outfits. She couldn't calm down, and the reason she was laughing is because I'm a big-chested girl and I'd gained weight as of recently because my eating disorder was flipping from anorexia to binge eating. None of my clothes fit me. I was in tears, and I just put on my normal jeans and hoodie in almost 80-degree weather, and I ran to Connor's car in tears. They kept trying to call me back into the house, but I just had to drive off without speaking to them. I didn't stay the night at their house for almost 2 days. Mum spent that first night texting me that I was overreacting and that none of the clothes fit me, and yes, she could have been nicer, but honestly, I need to be realistic about my fashion if I'm going to attempt it. If you couldn't tell by this point, my mum had picked out almost every piece of clothing I owned, and because I wasn't anorexic anymore, she was very upset whenever I showed skin. Day-to-day life was getting worse by the day, but eventually I opened commissions. I posted it on Facebook for family and nobody replied but my estranged grandmother on my mum's side, asking for an insanely difficult piece. I draw mostly pretty women in specific poses with pens or pencils, and that's it, especially back then. But she asked for a landscape drawing of her childhood home and a realistic watercolor drawing that she didn't have any reference of and hadn't seen since she was a kid. It was easily worth close to $150, maybe more because I'm terrible with commission prices. But I offered it for $60. My mother asked if I was serious. I told her that 1, I disliked this woman to the point of purposefully not contacting her for almost a decade at that point, and 2, this was so far out of my comfort zone that I would have to learn new skills just to make it, and it's more than half off. Then my dad texted me asking if I was serious. It devolved into a peeing contest on who can be colder and how fast I could move out. I wasn't pleasant, I'll be the first to admit that. I was mentally unstable and lashing out at everyone, but I was also still a child recovering from the toll of drugs that I was overprescribed and their emotional indifference during a freaking pandemic. I emergency moved in with my fiance, then boyfriend, and our friend who introduced us, and I didn't speak to them for a week. This is the beginning of their pattern that they pull literally to this day, regardless of the situation. They finally texted me back after about a week and a half, and acted as if nothing had happened. They hadn't kicked me out, I hadn't fought with them for days at that point, and we hadn't exchanged some of the meanest glances and short phrases of our lives to each other. They wanted to talk about the football game and trivial things in their lives. I didn't know what else to do. It was my family, and they were giving me the pass to be let back in after I'd mentally prepared myself to be shunned forever at this point. Of course, I took the olive branch. Maybe we'd speak about this in the future and laugh at how stuck up we'd been. It could all change for the better. Maybe. Me and my fiance lived there for a year or so before we contemplated moving to the town we'd met in and he grew up in. His whole family was there, and our current apartment was crawling with drug dealers, people stalking us for his old car, and people taking poops in the hallway. Sounds lovely. It was only an idea at that point, nothing concrete, but when I floated the idea to my dad one day when he was driving me home, he went on a rant about how I would become a baby factory for Connor if I moved away from my support system, and his family would turn me into their pawn because I was frankly too mentally weak of a person to not be swayed by them. This is your own father saying this to you. Wow. He went on for a long time and dumped a lot of info, and at random talked about how he kind of regretted having me and my siblings because he had us so young, and he regrets moving across the country like we did because of money problems. I asked him if he'd just told us that he regrets having us and living in this state, and he went, "I did not just say that. Don't put words in my mouth." I went into my apartment and sobbed for a good few hours. Connor was fuming, but was optimistic because at least he was talking. We both wrote off the bad parts and tried to move forward, hoping that this meant that he'd be open to talking more often in the future. We moved to my fiance's old home, and things were fine for a while. The longer I didn't live next to my family, the more I realized that I mentally couldn't handle them anymore. They'd been so mean and gaslighting. Slowly but surely, I was feeding my parents an info diet, and I was placing my boundaries. There were a lot of mean-spirited comments thrown my way. They used Connor for more labor during this time than keeping him at arm's length and refusing to acknowledge that we were serious and looking to move in together. Nothing of significance happened for about a year and a half until within the last year. So it's 2022 now, and me and Connor have lived together for most of the 3 or so years we've been together. We're living in our own home. I'm working 2 jobs and we're both happy. Stressed, but happy. Mum texts in our group chat that she wants me to give up my jobs and move back to their town to become a mailman like my dad. She swears that it's a government job with government pay and benefits, and it's the best I can do as a college dropout who's working 2 jobs. I replied back that I was making almost $1,300 a paycheck with both jobs, and I just moved into my house, and that the town she lived in was absolutely terrible. Remember my old apartments? That's all that's available there, and I wasn't keen on moving back now that I lived in a 3-bed house that's completely quiet and all my own. Well, she responds by calling me 4 times in one day, spam texted the group chat, and spams my DMs, sending Connor multiple texts, and then calling me again. I spent 2 days ignoring her before I finally replied. I answered her calls, and she spent almost the entire time during a 15-minute call that I put on speakerphone for Connor to listen to quietly, trying to manipulate me by calling me again a college dropout and telling me that I'm not happy there, I'm so far away from family, and there's no point in living there, especially since my jobs were working me to death and they had nowhere near the benefits that this mail carrier job has as a government job. I didn't have the heart or the verbal space to tell her that the US Postal Service is in fact not a government identity. It was privately owned. I did though tell her that all of those benefits I wouldn't need until I was 26 anyway. I had all of the supposed benefits from my dad also having the same job. She though glossed over that and talked over me to try and explain how miserable I was in that town. I told her I had to go and I hung up. Thanksgiving comes. My entire extended aunts and uncles on my dad's side come and stay with us. Things are looking good and I'm having fun with my family for once. Then I overheard my mum whispering to my uncle that her entire personality is just Connor. She's got no semblance of self anymore, and she even moved away to just become Connor's girl. My uncle didn't react or say anything, but I had to hide away to compose myself because I almost went nuclear and lost my mind. Okay, another time skip, and now we're in the present and getting closer to the end of our story. Connor proposed to me the day before Christmas Eve, surrounded by his incredibly loving family, by putting my ring in my stocking, and it was beautiful. The first person I called was my best friend, and then the second was my mother. It was close to 1 a.m. around this time, and I got her on the phone. I told her I knew it was late, but I was engaged. She told me though, in no uncertain terms, "Honey, that's amazing, but don't text in the family group chat or anything, because your dad's asleep and he has to get up at 5 a.m. Congrats, I'm going back to bed." Neither of them contacted me about my engagement for almost a week until I went back for their Christmas. I went with my best friend, and the entire time my family talked down to me. They misremembered my size, and instead of apologizing, they insisted that I didn't know my size and that I was indeed an XXL. I'm a medium to large. And they started the night off by mum mentioning my engagement only once. It started off with my mum suddenly in the middle of things going good and everyone laughing. She starts cackling and goes, "Oh, your dad and his friend had the funniest thing to say about your engagement. Dad, show her the text." Dad just smiles and he starts giggling too. My siblings laugh along with them. Dad says, "Oh, Amir just thought it was nuts that you were engaged because you're so young." I asked to see the text. Maybe I misunderstood him. There had to be something funny based on their reactions, because that was very much not funny at all, especially when I had my best friend sitting right there, listening. If anything, that was embarrassing. I read the text and it goes something like this. Dad's friend says, "Dude, she's engaged? That's nuts. She's too young and she's going into this way too quickly." Dad replies, "I know. I'm upset and struggling right now because my kids are all forcing themselves to grow up when they aren't ready to, and it's hard to stand by and watch them crash and burn like they inevitably will and do nothing about it." I just smiled because while they all laughed and giggled about how funny that was, I was struggling to not burst into tears and scream at them. My friend pulled me aside and asked multiple times if we should leave. At the time, I was using their car. But I told her no, I was going to play nice until I could give it back, and then once it was in their hands again, I was going to go no contact. Connor was supposed to come down and see them and spend Christmas with them, but he couldn't face them knowing that this is what they willingly showed us, especially after Thanksgiving. After this, I bought a car, my first car that's all mine, and I got their car back to them just last week. I'm putting my life together. I'm learning how to do the beginning of adult things well past when I should have. I learned to drive, pay bills, budget and spend, and how to exist, all from my fiance. I had to forcibly teach myself how to manage my own mental health with the help of my fiance and friends. I'm done making up excuses as to why I need them in my life. I don't want to deal with the body shaming, the classist behavior, the looking down on Connor for no reason. I can't handle it anymore. I called my uncle, the one from Thanksgiving, and explained to him my decisions, and he immediately told me he supports me and that my parents don't know how to treat us like adults, that I'm not a screw-up, and that was the first time in my life that I realized my parents had conditioned me into thinking I was in fact a screw-up. So, mum or dad, or anyone in the family, if you find this, these are the reasons why I blocked everyone's numbers and deleted Messenger. Why me and Connor have our statements and info ready for you when you send a welfare check to tell them to leave us alone. I'm going to get married and you won't be there. I won't let you be there. If I have a child, you won't see them. I don't care how much you cry and make me feel like I did something wrong. I am not a bad person for being screwed up, and the things you hold over my head were things I did as a drugged up child, a child that you should have protected and should have protected my siblings from. Screw you and screw all of your attempts at communication that you never did but say you have. Thank you to anyone who read this. I really just needed to yell. When they eventually find out that I cut them off because I gave them no warning beforehand, I just dipped after the car was no longer in my hands, they're gonna freak out. If anything memorable happens, I'll make an update, but probably not. Well guys, good news, there is I say good news, sorry, I've got to stop myself there. Is it good news? I'm pretty much saying there is an update, and we're going to get straight into it after I give my immediate comments on what I've just read, which was absolutely bamboozling. But hey, listen, if you're on YouTube, comment down below. Is it good news there's an update for us? I mean, is that a bit weird? Almost predatory? Kind of preying on someone's downfall, on OP's mishaps and their horrible family coming back into their life, so we get an extended episode and more of a story? I'm not sure. I'm not sure where I stand on it. But anyway, we're going to get into the update in just a second. However, I need to just talk about that story for just a hot minute because I can't believe the level of, I don't even know the word to use there because there are so many potential words. We can go with entitled, but that just seems far too basic. I think just malicious, manipulative, downright awful, 100% narcissistic heathens. That is just a few words I would use to describe your horrible parents. What an absolute disgrace they are. Now, what I will say, and obviously I'm saying this before we get into the update, it looks as if you have, by this point in your life, pretty much gotten rid of them. You say right at the end there that they're not even going to know what's hit them, and you have pretty much sacked them off. They're not going to go to your wedding, not going to meet your child, and that is amazing. The best revenge is a life well lived. And look, you just know for sure that if they see you, you know what, it doesn't even matter. I was going to say, you know, they're going to be jealous and they're going to be like, oh, we made such a mistake. But ultimately, you're not even going to care about that because you're going to be doing your own thing and forgetting about how toxic those people are. And it sounds like you're on the path of that, which is truly amazing. However, as I said, there is an update and I really hope that things continue on in a good vein. I haven't read ahead, so I don't know what's going to happen here. I'm pretty nervous, to be honest. I hope it's good. Anyway, here is that update. Let's get into it. Hi again, everyone. It's been about a month since my 2 a.m. pity party. I want to say thank you for the overwhelming support that I received on my other post. Especially the person who mentioned that my parents were fine with abusing me, but not my siblings since they were physically unwell rather than mentally unwell like me. That one hit home probably harder than any other comment. I didn't think of it that way, but honestly, it was something someone probably should have said. I'd like to apologize for how rambly and long the last post was. I was in the middle of a panic attack and I've been ignoring calls and texts from them for days. I felt like a horrible person and was gaslighting myself into almost going into contact with them again. Oh my gosh, OP, that's awful. The post was more for myself to understand and write out all the mean things they've done so that I could look back and be like, wow, they really reduced me to that. Ha. But for the actual update, I returned their car to them and after that, I vanished. I blocked all of my family's phone numbers, but left my siblings unblocked and open on all social media. I didn't want their numbers to be used to contact me unless it was actually them. Their numbers have since been unblocked. My parents didn't really notice at first. I got a text from mum saying that she was trying as hard as she could. I was just pulling away and she doesn't know why. I might post some of the screenshots of my conversations with them sometime in the future so you can all marvel at how self-centered they are. It was mostly mum for a bit, nothing really from dad. Then one day she texted that she was going to give me space because I wasn't talking to them for some reason, and she ceased all contact after that. It was quiet for about a week. Then dad started calling me. My phone shows me the caller ID and the time they called, but blocks the call itself. So I got to see almost every morning for about a week or so that I had a missed call from him. Then he started texting me and he tried to use the age-old tactic of intimidation to get me to talk to him. It was mostly just, you better answer the phone right now. Then he'd call a bunch, but he finally sent a text about a week ago being cryptic about how I wouldn't know about stuff till after it happened, and if I was going to act like a child, these were the consequences. I kind of just rolled my eyes and didn't respond. It turns out after skimming the family group chat, he's been diagnosed with pretty bad carpal tunnel syndrome in both of his hands and a severe lower back injury they've yet to figure out. He also suffers from a myriad of other illnesses right now, but he still forces himself to work 60 plus hours a week as a postal carrier, so I don't know what he expects. To be honest, this might make me a bad person, but I didn't really care. If it had been about my siblings, I would have probably jumped on the phone and been freaking out. But I don't really hold any feelings besides resentment, confusion, and anger with my parents, so this news didn't really faze me. I don't blame you. In better news, Connor has received a few raises due to county regulations being changed, and I now also have a job with the county. I'll be moving on to my own insurance and finally moving onto it without worrying about contact. I also learned right about that time that my parents had taken out 5 different loans in my name to pay for college, all varying up to about $12,000. They did not explain this with me at all and had apparently been paying them all for the last 3 years. So I have credit, I guess, when I thought I didn't. So yippee! I have to figure out a way to transfer it into my name and figure out the logistics, but yeah, that's a thing now. My siblings haven't contacted me. The middle one is incredibly angry with my behavior and wants me to contact my mum at least. I've just avoided the topic with her. My other sibling, I can't honestly tell you how they feel, but they apparently plan to move to a big city about 4 hours away for college in the coming years. So let's hope they go through the same transformation I did. And that's honestly about it. Lots of weird texts that they did nothing but stress themselves out with, and my financial situation is looking up. We also bought a dog recently. Her name is Mandy, and our other dog, Copper, is still getting used to her. So my days are occupied mostly with taking care of a German Shepherd puppy who body slams me awake at 6 a.m. every day. I hope everyone has a great day, and thank you all again for the wonderful and supportive comments on my last post. Phew, sigh of relief from me, because let me tell you, I was very concerned that we were going to get a very long and horrible update, but that is pretty good. As you say, hopefully at some point soon, your siblings will see the light, maybe when they get to the stage of your life that you were in. I mean, as you mentioned, your parents gaslit you for so long, you actually thought that you were the problem. It wouldn't surprise me if your siblings are feeling the same way, or at least the same way about you. Imagine having your parents telling you, for years, this sibling is disgusting, only to then realize later on in life that actually no, they were just actually gaslighting that sibling the entire time, and I've been thinking the wrong thing because of my parents. All those years, I've been influenced in the worst way possible. I would not blame your siblings if they had that mindset until they move out and realize what's really going on. As for you, OP, I've just got to say, how strong. And yeah, you might say it's a bit cringy, guys. I don't really care, right? Elite from OP. Just put yourself in that position. And maybe some of you watching and listening right now are, or at least were in that position in your childhood and teenage years. I, for one, I'm not sure if I'll be able to cope. Maybe it just becomes your reality and you can deal with it, but going through all the stuff that OP went through and coming out of it like this is pretty unbelievable, I've got to say. I invited my aunt to a family reunion cruise, and she wants everyone to pay an additional $1,000 for her kids to have fun. I've really been struggling on whether or not to post this, because I just want this situation to be resolved. My husband and I moved away from our homestay approximately 5 years ago, and since then, my husband hasn't been back to visit. It's been easier for me to go because I have more family that I'm close with, and he would prefer to save his limited vacation time and watch our dogs. However, we've reached a point where we decided it's time for both of us to make a trip down together and make the effort to plan something with family and friends that he hasn't seen in a long time. We decided the easiest way for us to get some quality time in with people would be to invite everyone on a cruise this summer. We have around 40 people that we're inviting total, many of whom fit the senior demographic, and all, of course, will have varying incomes. A cruise is already a high barrier to entry, so my priority has been finding a line that would be as accessible as possible financially, would go through Glacier Bay while also fitting the needs of as many people as possible. I ended up settling on Holland America after all things considered. Well, as soon as I invited my aunt and uncle, she immediately jumped in the driver's seat, trying to control which line we took. First, it was that we had to cruise through Norwegian or a line that was first and foremost family-oriented. She explicitly told me, "If my kids are miserable, we will be miserable." Her children are 11 and 14, so I find this absolutely ridiculous. This is a family reunion, and secondly, at this age, they should be old enough to understand why we're not taking their typical cruise for this trip. For reference, Holland America is a line targeting older people, yes. However, they still have pickleball courts, cornhole, shuffleboard, a large selection of board games, family-friendly entertainment, and a large pool with the ability to be converted to an indoor pool when we reach the glaciers, unlike other ships. My husband cruised as a 10-year-old boy before he had a phone or other tech, and attests that he didn't even use the child amenities on the ship and had a good time hanging out, eating desserts and swimming. We would also be happy to bring a spare Nintendo Switch or even the Steam Deck that I recently got as a gift. I made the mistake of entertaining the cruises she was sending by looking at them all, and I quickly realized they were all either astronomically more expensive, didn't go through Glacier Bay, or a ship that would be absolutely packed with children, which would not be a cruise the rest of the family would have a relaxing time on. I've had to do a lot of work in setting boundaries over the years, and I find people with controlling personality types to be extremely triggering when they don't consider the needs of everyone else. Ultimately though, I recognize the importance of needing to stand my ground in this situation with the original cruise, and I tried to tell her no in a nice way with an explanation on why. I can't let this difference in price potentially be the reason why my husband's best friend or cousins couldn't afford to come. Now, I never got a reply, and later I learned that she'd called my grandma trying to play sides and win over support for the line she wants. My grandma agreed with our plan, but she did admit that the situation with my aunt robbed some of the joys that she'd had about the trip, which upsets me on her behalf. My aunt also told my grandma they wouldn't go if it's the line I chose. I am very disappointed in this, and I will be hurt if this is the case. I attended several family reunions as a child with no technology, and I had to sit in the car for 30 plus hours and was still happy to go with my grandparents. And I was even younger than these kids, so I'm a bit taken aback as to why their kids need so much to have a good time. Ever since I sent the text, I've had radio silence from her. My uncle, on the other hand, seemed to completely understand in his reply, but I honestly don't know if he feels the same way as her behind the scenes. As a young couple in our late 20s, my husband and I aren't on the cruise ship of our dreams, but we need to be thinking of everyone here. and I hope as time goes on, she can put things into perspective and understand me better. At this point, I don't feel responsible to explain myself any more than I already have, and what they decide to do is out of my control. You know what? In my opinion, there's a simple enough solution here. Just tell your aunt that she will be thoroughly missed on your trip, but you're not going to change the plans and make them $1,000 per person more expensive just because of her and her kids. Of course you're not going to do that. Simple as that. The other thing that I don't get is that if you go on any cruise ship at all, even if it's targeted at seniors, there is still a lot of stuff for young kids to do. The beauty of a cruise ship is that you get on and off, and then once you're off, obviously there are things to do. And once you're on, are they really not going to have fun on an entire cruise ship? Eating great food from a buffet, swimming, I don't know, doing anything, playing board games, chilling, going on their phone or whatever. Like, there's so much stuff to do. And also, you're on holiday. It just screams entitled, and I guess that makes sense. Nonetheless, let's carry on. We're identical twins, so you have to financially support my kid. Okay, so this isn't my story. This is my best friend Tommy's. All names have been changed, by the way. Tommy and I became best friends in middle school. We bonded over the fact that we're both identical twins who have horrible twin siblings. Tommy's brother Jack is a deadbeat who thinks everything should be handed to him. He also is a huge player and has a new girlfriend every few months. This eventually came back to bite him in the butt when he got one of them pregnant. Now, Jack has no job and lives with his parents, who completely support him. But when they found out he got his girlfriend pregnant, they made it clear that he had to get a job if he wanted to stay there. His girlfriend Abby also has no job and has the same attitude as Jack. Neither wants to work, and they both believe everyone else should be supporting them. Now, Tommy has a good job and makes good money, which absolutely angers Jack. When they found out Abby was pregnant, they asked Tommy for a substantial amount of money. Tommy refused, which caused Jack to get mad. This caused them to come up with an insane plan to get money out of Tommy. One day, they confronted Tommy and told him that if he didn't give them the money, they would just say he was the father and go after him for child support. They read a story online where a woman actually did end up getting child support from two identical twins as they couldn't figure out the father. What? That is mental. From what Tommy told me, they had pretty smug looks on their faces when they told him. Here's a sum up of how the conversation went. They were at a party for one of Tommy and Jack's relatives when Jack and Abby come up and talk to Tommy. "So, have you changed your mind about giving us the money?" asked Jack. "No, we figured you'd say that, so we have another plan." "What's the plan?" "Well, since you won't give us the money, we thought of another idea." "What are you talking about?" Abby read online about how a woman was able to get child support from two identical twin brothers because DNA-wise they couldn't tell who the father was. "So we're going to tell people you're the father, and since your DNA is the same as mine, any test will come out positive." Now, Tommy was a little shocked when they first said that, not because he was worried, but because he realized his brother was an even bigger and dumber jerk than he thought. "Jack, I know you smoke a lot of weed and who knows what else, but you seriously can't be this dumb." "I'm not dumb. I'm a genius. It worked before. Look it up." "Yeah, you're forgetting a very important factor in all of this." "What's that?" "You know, the whole having cancer as a teenager thing? The countless round of chemo, the multiple surgeries?" "Yeah, nice try, but people can still have kids after cancer, mate. Look it up." This caused Tommy to start laughing. "Why are you laughing?" "Because, you idiot, I had testicular cancer. Both my testicles were removed. I've literally been sterile for over 13 years. "Well, they don't know that." "Yeah, my medical history does. All I have to do is show them and the case will easily be thrown out." This made Jack and Abby mad, and they started belittling Tommy, calling him every name in the book. For those worried about the baby, they did eventually end up putting the baby up for adoption. Well, I'm not quite sure what's more ridiculous. The fact that someone's own brother forgot they had their testicles removed after having cancer, or that they're going after their own brother trying to get child support for their child. I mean, both are pretty crazy. And I guess if there was one good thing to come out of having testicular cancer, is that your own identical twin brother can't put responsibilities on you about their child. Yeah, it's a stretch, isn't it? It really is. But hey, so is this entire story. I will say though, I do want to find the story about the woman who actually did this successfully, because that is mental. Like, say you didn't have your testicles removed. Could this genuinely have happened? I don't see why not, right? You do have the same DNA. That would have been unbelievable. Okay then, now moving on to our final story of today's episode. And guys, I have saved the best till last on this one. This one is a little bit more serious than the previous two, I guess. Although I'm not saying that testicular cancer isn't serious. You'll get what I mean. Maybe it's a little deeper, but nonetheless, it's a great one. Parents threw me out as a child and then expected everything from me when my grandparents died. I was born when my mother and father were only 17. It forced both of my parents to drop out of high school and each get a GED so they could find work right away. My father especially was not happy about this because he had dreams of playing football in college, and instead he had to work at a gas station. He said to my face many times that I ruined his dream. My mother hardly raised me at all, as she had to work too. They had a cranky old lady next door watch me most of the time. She wasn't so bad. She gave me more attention than my parents did. My father eventually managed to land a better job as a manager due to his experience running the gas station. It was right after that my mum got pregnant with my sister. I was 6 when she was born. I wasn't exactly shown much love before that, but once my sister came along, it was made pretty obvious to even my 6-year-old self that I was unwanted. The only ones who seemed to care were my paternal grandparents, and somewhat my babysitter. And they were more like my parents, as they treated me the way a little kid needed to be loved. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment, and as my sister got older, it went from me sharing a bedroom with her to me kicked out of the room entirely. I slept on the couch for 2 years, and I barely had anything to my name other than clothes, school supplies, and an old Game Boy. When I was 10, my parents decided they were going to move away. But this move did not include me. I ended up actually being fine with this, as my grandparents had agreed to take me in. My life was instantly better. I got my own room again, and my grandparents gifted me a brand new N64 in 1996. That Christmas, I got a Game Boy Pocket too, and there were a couple of other kids my age in the neighborhood I got to hang out with. We rode bikes, played video games, shot cans with pellet guns, built forts, and got dirty playing in the creek. You know, stuff a normal kid would enjoy. I was finally happy. As time went on, I grew up and eventually moved out, but I later moved back in to help my grandparents' house as they were getting old and living off their retirement savings. So some rent money from me went a long way in paying the bills. My grandpa was the kind of person who'd wanted to build a bomb shelter during the Cold War, but never got around to it. He wanted to volunteer for the military in the 60s, but was turned down due to a medical condition and the fact his eyesight wasn't great. So he focused on saving whatever he thought he needed. He told me many times it was better to have something and not need it than need it and not have it. Our area suffered from numerous power outages in winter due to heavy winds and storms, so having gasoline and propane for heaters and generators was a must. All these saving habits became my own as time went on, as it was better to need this stuff rarely than not have it at all. Of course, there was our HOA bothering us, but that's its own other story. The problem is, about 5 years back, my grandma died suddenly, and my grandpa was heartbroken. He also went about 1.5 years later. Pretty much everything they owned was willed to me. Their savings, their house, their vehicles, their stuff, everything. The house was long paid off, and Grandpa knew how to keep up with its maintenance. In fact, after Grandma died, he kinda doubled down on renovating the place. He had the roof redone, the house repainted by us inside and out, and we fixed a lot of little things. Grandpa's neighbor, George, even came by to help redo the plumbing. Ironically, the HOA was rather happy with these changes because the house didn't look run down anymore. One morning, I was fixing breakfast and my grandpa never came downstairs. You couldn't keep the man from his bacon. So I went to check on him, and he wasn't moving. I called 911 and paramedics came, only to tell me that he'd passed in his sleep. My parents made Grandpa's funeral a trash show. They didn't bother to show up for Grandma's. They were too busy. And at Grandpa's funeral, they didn't seem to grieve at all. My sister also showed up wearing a brightly coloured designer dress, which I wasn't happy about, as it was a church clothes only function. I noticed my parents repeatedly whispering to each other and glaring at me whenever I looked at them. I come to find out at the will reading that my parents knew that they'd been disinherited long ago for their treatment of me, and they thought it was extremely unfair that I got everything. They threatened to sue me to contest the will, and I got repeated calls and messages from my father, mother, and sister telling me I needed to do the right thing and give my father what was supposed to be his. I told them all to flake off in far more unsavory words. My parents ended up taking me to court to challenge the will, but the judge ruled in my favor after seeing the will and hearing us both out. So it wasn't a long drawn out legal battle. The judge even looked at my parents with absolute disgust after seeing the will and hearing about their mistreatment of me in my childhood. he called my father a terrible parent and that my grandparents were right to disown him. My father just hung his head in silence, but he made sure to stop me outside the courtroom and tell me I was always the biggest mistake of his life, and that if he could go back in time, he'd make sure I never existed. He should have been a football star, and instead, he has to wear a name tag for a 9 to 5. I told him that, mistake or not, Grandma and Grandpa could see what kind of nasty person he was. I didn't ask to be born, and the only real love I ever got was from my grandparents, and he was no father of mine anymore. You see, what's funny about all of that is that his outburst immediately after the court proceedings, guys, just confirmed exactly what the judge said, that he is a terrible father. Tough. I got a few more threatening and harassing phone calls, as well as some letters from my parents, all demanding money among other things. But over time they just stopped, as I was completely stonewalling them. I never responded to the emails or letters, and I stayed silent during the phone calls. A few times I just let the phone sitting on the counter with them ranting till they realized I wasn't listening. Aside from not getting the house or money, my parents seemed particularly irked they could not even get a rise out of me. But I was prepared to go to war against them, and they knew it. So in the end, they just left me alone. From what I know, looking at Facebook the past decade, my sister tried to get into modeling, got married, had 2 kids, got divorced, and is currently unhappy working a job that she feels is beneath her. My mother currently works retail and is also vocal about her disdain of it. Like my father, she peaked in high school. She was a cheerleader back then and even had her old uniform framed on the wall. My father has pretty much had the same job for 25 years. He must be good at it if he's still doing it. As for me, well, I'm in my late 30s now, and I live pretty much debt-free in a nice neighborhood. I haven't really had a girlfriend since high school, and I've had little motivation to ever have another relationship. But loneliness gets to everyone, so maybe I'll try to find someone soon. Not many are in the financial position that I'm in at my age. Single, paid off house, 2 vehicles, and a decent amount in the bank. I guess I could aim to be a stepfather. That might be more my speed. And there we go. That is the end of that one. A lovely little slide dig at your dad right at the end there, which I'm not going to lie, I absolutely loved. Oh, you must love the job if you've been in it for 25 years. It definitely won't be because you can't get any other job and you're forced to remain in that one that you actually really dislike. That definitely wouldn't be the reason. Just love it. What a way to end it. All I would say now from your perspective, OP, is even though you are very young, as you say, make sure you get your own will. Because the worst thing that could possibly happen now would be to say you, God forbid, happen to get into an accident or something happened, illness, whatever, and you passed. Imagine now that your entire family that you've pretty much disowned get all the things that they were after in the first place. You have to make sure that in the worst of the worst case scenarios, that can't happen. So get a will and give everything to your friends, your mates, anyone, doesn't even matter. As long as it's not your family and they don't get the stuff that they've been trying to get for so many years, that's good. So just, cover yourself, make sure you've done 99% of the work. That last 1% is what you need to do just to ensure that they never get anything. Mum kidnapped our kids and said she didn't know it was against the rules. So, my wife and I have 2 kids, a nearly 3-year-old and an 18-month-old. We want to cruise to the Bahamas for 2, meaning the kids couldn't go. My mother volunteers to watch the kids. Great, it's all settled. We're going to get away for a week and have some time for ourselves. As the date approaches, Mum starts talking about having the kids at her house for the week. We told her we were under the impression that she was going to be at our house. All the kids' stuff is here. Our home is a single story and easy to track the kids in. It's significantly closer to all of their doctors for emergencies. We're talking 20 minutes versus an hour and a half. And our house is baby-proofed, where hers is not. So we said that we really felt they should be at our house. And if that didn't work for her, we would make other arrangements. She said that our house was fine. But a few days later, she says that she would like to be at her house because my siblings, who still live with her, could help watch the kids. These are the same siblings who we were told needed to be instructed on how to be nice to toddlers, which is why we weren't invited to Thanksgiving. No thanks, we'll get you support through our own channels, people we know and like who can pop in to get you relief and help out. We leave for our trip, though as we are showing Mum where everything is and going over food and snacks, she's more interested in playing with the kids than learning where the diapers are. So, day 1 in the boat. My wife uses the boat's internet to do a video call to check on the kids. All seems fine, but my mother tells her not to call again for the rest of the trip because it may upset the children. My wife doesn't tell me about that part of their convo right away, but as soon as she does, we call her back. When she answers, she's at her house with the kids, and you can see the brand new kids apparel and paraphernalia in the background. I asked her what happened, and she tells me she was really sick and thinks she got norovirus. What the heck? Super nauseous, it was all she could do to call her brother, who lives 5 minutes from me, to have him pack the kids in my wife's car and drive an hour and a half to her house. So, you were so sick that you couldn't watch the kids, but you could drive home in a car that wasn't yours and endanger kids that aren't yours in the event that you pass out or spontaneously start vomiting while on the freeway, potentially killing our children? Why didn't you call the list of people who said they'd come and help? They'd set aside parts of their weeks to come out and support with their time and money. Do they even know the kids aren't home? Do you know that one person is staying in a hotel to be 10 minutes away from you in case of emergency? Now they're an hour and a half from home and none the wiser for what's happening. The first thing she says is that she really was sick. I never accused her of not being sick. Yeah, I doubted it, but I never said it. Then she tells me how dare I judge her for her decisions and that she doesn't have to justify herself to me and that she doesn't have to watch my kids. I told her to pack my kids up in the car and take them home. Someone else was going to watch them. When she dropped the kids off, she was nasty to their new caretakers and sulked. As soon as I knew the kids were safe, I sent her a message saying she clearly didn't respect us as parents. Doesn't matter how many kids she raised, these are ours, and she sure as heck needed to justify herself and check in with us if she was too sick to do her job. We have the right to know what's going on with our kids, and any sane person would call and ask us what we wanted them to do before packing the kids up and taking them away. If the roles were reversed, she would have absolutely lost her mind. And I know, because I've seen it. And that she didn't need to see the kids again if she was going to go that far out of her way to undermine us and then act like a spoiled child to family and friends when she gets caught. Then the next day, she replied to the message saying that she didn't realize she did anything that was that far out of expected parameters. Yeah, her words. And that she recognized that parents had their own rules and she would have to learn ours. Never did anything resembling sorry come across in that message or any other. We blocked her on social media and haven't spoken to her since. Okay, straight off the bat, I've got to say this. You should not let your kids anywhere near this woman anymore. Yes, blocking her on social media and her number is a good start, but I don't care who she is. I don't even care that she's your mum. She is literally endangering the safety and the lives of your children. And that is more than enough to say that you should not let her anywhere near them. The fact that she won't even take responsibility for her actions is crazy. And now she expects you to see this all as a simple misunderstanding. Let her off the hook and say, you know what? Yeah, we understand you made a mistake. Try again. Not gonna happen. Karen lets her kids wake everyone up at 2 a.m. So, I've just come back from a coach trip from the UK to Disneyland Paris. It was a wonderful trip, apart from one family who decided they could do whatever they wanted with no consequence. To set the scene, me and my two friends have just arrived at the bus stop and are waiting for the coach. In front of us is a family of 4 adults and 3 children. A young girl around the age of 10, a boy also around the age of 10, and a teenage boy. All 3 are sat on the floor attempting to play a card game. However, the girl is screaming at the top of her lungs, telling the other kids how to play the game. The adults tried to intervene once, got sworn at by the child, and then gave up. Me and my friends exchanged glances before resorting to sending each other memes, silently voicing our discontent. Luckily, we were seated at the front of the coach and the family were at the back. But we could still hear the girl yelling all the way. We let it slide though because, hey, we're going to Disneyland and they're probably just excited. We went on to have a wonderful couple of days in Disneyland, completely forgetting that this family even existed, until it was time to come home. You see, guys, we are broke, so we booked a coach that left Disney at 8 p.m, arriving back in London at 4:30 a.m. It's a given that you'd want to sleep on the coach. Well, as we waited for our coach to come and collect us, there we were, reminded of that child's piercing screams and shrieks as she ran around the car park and in front of cars, whilst the adults once again did nothing. My friends and I exchanged worried glances, but it was only the beginning. Once on the coach, people started pulling out neck pillows and blankets, ready to attempt to sleep. But not that family. They talked loudly about their trip and complained that the coach driver hadn't put the radio on for us. People were already grumbling, but the family paid them no mind. When we reached Calais, it got worse. The driver asked for a volunteer to collect everyone's passports and bring them to the front. One of the adults and the girl's mother volunteered and had to sit at the front with the driver while sorting the passports. Well, the child decided that that was an invitation to run up and down the aisle between her parents before loudly demanding that her mother sing happy birthday in Welsh. This was at midnight. After border control had checked our passports, the mother decided to hand some of them to her children. But that wasn't good enough for the little girl, who kept screaming at her mother to give her more. Apparently, no was not a word she could understand, and she simply kept screaming. Even when people stated they were not comfortable with children handling their passports, the kids still got to hand them out. And then we finally boarded the ferry at 1:35 a.m., ready for a quiet crossing. We were wrong. Initially, my friends and I had sat in an area with a kids' play area. We quickly realized and relocated to a quieter area of the ship so we could try and grab some sleep. People around us were sprawled out on benches with blankets over their heads, and mothers had sleeping children in their laps. We found a quiet corner and started to doze off. Then we heard it. That same piercing shrieking, all from that girl. They were running up and down the length of the ship, shouting and shrieking as they went. People were being startled awake every single time they went by. Other children were beginning to cry because they were tired. The teenage boy was literally winding up the younger two, making them shout even more. The adults of the group were nowhere to be seen. Eventually, I snapped. After a particularly piercing shriek, I yelled, "Quiet, please! It is 2 o'clock in the morning and people are trying to sleep!" Several other murmurs of agreement surrounded me. They went silent, looked at me, and ran off. I knew what was coming. We all knew. In marched one of the adults. Not the mother, just another one of the adults. "What did you say to the kids?" she demanded, loudly, of course. I said, "Quiet, please. There are people trying to sleep." I gestured to the people groggily emerging from their blankets to see what the commotion was. "If you've got a problem, speak to an adult. Don't shout at kids." "Well, where were you?" "Down there," she points. "They were at the opposite end of the ship." "So why weren't you with them?" "They're hyper. Kids are gonna be hyper." "Again, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and people are trying to sleep." "Well, you should have come and talked to us." "How was I supposed to know who you were or where you'd be?" Whatever, just don't shout at kids." And then they left. Was that the end? Oh no, they continued their shrieking and running. When we attempted to find the adults as they had requested, they had moved and were nowhere to be found again. The girl also tried to stare me out a couple of times. I think she was trying to intimidate me, which is laughable. Eventually, the ferry trip came to an end, and I waited until the last possible second to get back on the coach so that they wouldn't have to walk past me. I was thanked several times by fellow ferry passengers in both French and English for my attempts to shut those kids the heck up. I do wonder how much of a problem it would have been if I woke their kids up at 2 a.m. Alright guys, just put yourself in this position right now. You are OP. Or you are one of OP's kids. You're knackered, you have had a great holiday, fair enough, but you just want to get a little bit of terrible shut-eye. Look, you're on an overnight ferry anyway. It's not ideal. No one's enjoying this situation. But come on, the last thing you want is this. And to be honest, don't really blame the kid, because if the kid is being enabled by these terrible parents who are actively trying to avoid, like you can imagine them, they're like, oh, I don't want to get annoyed by these other adults again. Let's just move to another corner of the ship as far away from our shrieking kids as we possibly can. I mean, who knows? The girl's probably annoying them at the same time, right? But they're just like, oh, don't even care. Let her roam free. Not my problem, even though that's my daughter. Then, yeah, I can't really blame the kid too much. You know what's funny though? I think this is true. These adults are probably the sort of people that when it affects them, they go mental. You can just see it from a mile away, right? Probably even with their own daughter. Like if they were the ones that were trying to sleep at 2 a.m. and someone else was making noise, even their own daughter, as OP said at the very end of this, then goodness me, I think they would have given it absolute hell. But no, because it's not really affecting them, it's not their problem, so they don't care. And now for our final entitled parent story of this episode. Deadbeat mum decides to make demands from me. My childhood was an absolute trash show, and I'm still dealing with the ramifications today. My parents divorced when I was barely 2 years old. My father was very abusive and was in and out of jail and homelessness my whole life. When I was 6, my mum, who was a once a month on the weekends parent, she never showed up to the custody hearings, so the judge gave custody to my abusive dad, decided she couldn't be a mother anymore, married another man, moved states, and had another child that she loved enough to raise. I only saw my bio mother about 5 times in my entire childhood. I was raised by my abusive father and my grandma until he OD'd when I was 17. My mum didn't want to go to the courts to get custody, and neither did my grandma, since I was a senior in high school. So CPS decided to just let me keep living with my grandma until I graduated. So I became a legal orphan. I was able to go to college for free due to being an orphan and being in poverty. I eventually joined the military, moved out of my trashhole state, got married, and I've been living a great life ever since. I went about 7 years without speaking with my bio mum on the phone or in person, until randomly, about 2 years ago, when I went back to my home state to visit my dad's side of the family. I hadn't seen them in over 3 years. I avoid going home often because everyone but me are either druggy or living in poverty, so they're always harassing my husband and I for money, favors, etc., while also yelling at me for having the audacity to fight my way out of poverty and make a life for myself. Anyway, my bio mum called me and had apparently moved back to my home state with my half-sister several years ago, and I had no idea. She begged me to meet her in person, where she then spent 2 hours sobbing about how sorry she is for abandoning me to my abusive father and how she regrets it every day. I tentatively agreed to forgive her and slowly build a relationship. She was happy with just my half-sister at first, but is now upset that I treat her now as some distant aunt instead of having a mother-daughter relationship. To be honest, we'll never have a mother-daughter relationship. If she wanted one, she should have raised me. Anyway, my half-sister also decided to reach out to me and create a relationship. We talk all the time and have become close. The last time I went home to visit, we went out to eat, and she asked me what the plan was for mum once she gets too old to take care of herself. I said whatever she decides to do, I'll emotionally support her for her decision. She asked what I meant, and I said that really I have zero plans to financially or physically help my mother in any way. She didn't raise me, she doesn't get the joy of having her oldest daughter take care of her in her old age. My half-sister was very upset with me and ran and told my mum, who then decided to start blowing up my phone, saying that she apologized and is trying, but that doesn't mean that I can abandon her in her time of need. I just laughed and hung up the phone. My husband fricking hates her and only puts up with her at all because of me. I don't know where this audacity is coming from. I don't know her and she doesn't know me, but because I have more money and no kids, she thinks I should be the one to house and help her. Nope, not happening. And there we go, a pretty simple one in its conclusion in my opinion. When the burden was on her to help you out, she didn't want anything to do with you and didn't even want to help one iota. But when the roles have been reversed and the burden is now potentially on you to help her out, financially or in any way, oh, no, I really need your help. And actually, it's really unfair that you're not helping me by giving me money after all the amazing parenting I did back in the day. It's as simple as that. She doesn't care for you as much as she's trying to fake that she does. She just wants your cash. Sorry, but that's the truth. And thankfully, OP knows it. My psycho mother doesn't know that I'll be gone in 10 days. I, a female to male 19-year-old, am going to move out in 10 days. It took forever to get here, and I still need to scrounge up some last-minute stuff, but I'm doing it. I'm moving out and getting the heck away from her. Background on everything. There's a lot of generational abuse in my family. Abuse she passed down to me. While it wasn't always physical, her and my father's actions led me down a spiral of SH and multiple unalive attempts for 2 years straight. The fact that I'm alive is a miracle. I'm a bit better now, don't worry. She's going to disown me once I transition, and I stayed in this house for 3 years on the terms that I pretend to be someone else or I'd be homeless. Very icky people pretty much, and they can't see it. They did try to improve and the physical violence stopped, but they can never fix what they did. Moving on, I made the mistake of telling her I was apartment searching a month or so ago and had her instantly dump on me. What was supposed to be a celebration turned to her dogging on me. It was basically a "you will never make it, so just stay home" conversation that she would not let up on no matter how many times I asked her to stop. Even when I told her that she was making me uncomfortable and I didn't want to talk about it any further, she keeps going. If I literally stare at her and say nothing, give her no reason to keep talking, she still does. I literally had to tell her when she got mad at me for it. So I'm there, going to town on a corn dog. Now, what does that mean? So I'm there, going to town on a corn dog. And I said, I told you to stop. You didn't listen. I'm not even responding and you're still going. I'm giving you a really big hint here and you're not getting it. She got mad. Well, how was I supposed to know? You should have just told me. I then took a big bite of corn dog and said, yeah, I did tell you. Multiple times. You didn't listen. After that, I didn't talk about the apartment to her at all. She nagged to know my roommates and begged to know where I'll be living if I do move out, but she won't know. Ever. The whole, what if something happens and you need us spiel. She has no idea that I'm going full no contact, and that makes me happy. I woke up a few days ago to her ranting about how I need to stay home and focus on your studies. I just sat there on the bathroom floor holding back a smile because she thinks that I've given up. She doesn't know I'm about to give my security deposit and collect my keys on the 27th. When the day comes, I'm not even going to give her the decency of seeing me leave. I'm packing my stuff and I'm going out the back. No text, no camera footage, nothing. In 10 days, I'm going to disappear from her life and finally be myself. I'm sleep deprived to heck and back, stressed out from all the work it took to get here, and probably one cheeseburger from a breakdown. I've had so many bumps on the way and so many things tried to screw me over the past few months, the past few freaking years, actually. But I literally couldn't be happier. 10 days and I'm free. Life, here I come. And there we go. I'm not going to lie, guys. For a second there, when I read the title, I thought something drastic was going to happen. And obviously, unaliving was brought up during this story. But thankfully, OP is just moving out. It's not actually doing anything tragic. So yeah, that is good news. Genuinely, what started as me being very shocked turned into a quite positive ending. You only get one life, and OP is deciding to do with it what they want, which is ultimately what we all should do, especially if you're in OP's situation. So great to see, and genuinely, I'm happy for you. Entitled Kid and Parents at the Mario movie. No spoilers, by the way, guys. This happened a few weeks ago when the movie first came out. I went to go and see the new Mario movie, as I was really hyped for it as I'm a pretty big Mario fan. It was pretty good, in my opinion. And to celebrate, I decided to go dressed as Mario. It wasn't a really good cosplay, as I just threw on some old blue overalls, a red long sleeve shirt, a replica of Mario's hat I bought at the Nintendo store in New York City, and some work gloves. I even brought along a plush super mushroom that my late aunt bought for me in China. Well, to be fair, sounds like a pretty good cosplay to me. Anyways, I got to the theater, paid for my ticket, and got my snacks. A large bag of popcorn, some candy bars, and a blue raspberry slushie. However, the movie didn't start for another 1.5 hours, so I just hung out in the small arcade that they had there. While I was there was also a little boy with his mum, and he kept eyeing me and got all excited. Keeping with the Mario theme, let's call the mum Bowsette and the kid Bowser Jr. "Mummy, look, it's Mario," said Bowser Jr. "Yes, I know. Can I go and see him?" "Fine," the mum said. So Bowser Jr. runs up to Mario, me, and that is when he sees my mushroom. "Wow, a mushroom! Can I have it?" "Sorry, this mushroom means a lot to me," I replied. "But you don't need it." "Well, yes, I do." Bowser sees Bowser Jr. arguing with me and stomps on over. "Give him the toy." "Sorry, I can't just give it to him as it means a lot to me." "Just give him the toy." "Sorry, can't do." "But you don't need it, you're too old for it." After she said that, I just ignored them both, and I grabbed my snacks and went to sit in the auditorium where the movie was playing. I guess they forgot about me, because when the movie finished, they walked out of the room without looking at me. And after that, I never saw them again. I still enjoyed the movie. And if you're wondering about the mushroom, it's chilling right next to me on my bed as I'm writing this post. Guys, comment down below. New Mario movie, no spoilers please, but is it worth watching? Now my question is, as someone who hasn't seen it yet, if I go to the cinema to watch it, will it be inundated with entitled families like this? Because if it is, that is going to slightly put me off. You know, if I have children and adults coming up to me saying, "Give me your stuff, your snacks, your outfit." I mean, who knows? I might cosplay myself. Good news is though, OP has posted a picture of the infamous super mushroom, and here it is on screen right now. If you can't see it on screen, if you're listening on podcast platforms, well, it's just a toad from the Mario games. If you know, you know. Looks lovely. Looks like something that you'd want to keep, especially as it was handed down to you by your late aunt. People just aren't going to understand that though. They're going to see this, the kid's going to see this and think, just give it to me, because they're entitled and they're bratty. And the enabling mother is going to say, yeah, come on, it's just a toy. But in reality, nobody really knows the context behind it. And that's on them. Pretty much, you should never just assume that something is just a toy. It's more about the message and the meaning behind it, which makes it so important to you. Dad continues his controlling ways and now has no contact with both of his sons. First of all, some background. My dad has always had control and anger issues. He worked hard to give my mum, brother and I what we needed, but he wasn't really emotionally there. Growing up with him was tough. If I vacuumed and didn't do it exactly how he would do it, he'd make comments. If he did something wrong once, he would immediately say, "You never do anything right." Could not fathom that people make mistakes and that mistakes happen, especially since he made plenty of them, just never admitted to it. He had friends and relatives live with us without ever asking my mum, brother or I if we'd be okay with it. Not asking my mum, who is the person that ends up taking on the additional work, was the most annoying thing for me. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. I was okay sharing a room with my brother, but not quite okay sharing it with an uncle for years, another relative, and once even some random guy who was a friend of a friend. He sacrificed the comfort of me, my mum, and my brother to make himself look good by offering space to these people for long periods of time. Think years, by the way, not days. There are plenty more examples of his selfish and controlling behavior, not to mention him having a short fuse. Despite all of this, he did work hard and had his moments, and I'll always appreciate the things he did do. We did have everything we needed. First son goes no contact. A couple of summers ago, my dad and I got into an argument. The argument was over me and my wife's dog. My dad is a very religious Muslim and has gotten more religious as he ages. For example, he took down all of the pictures they had of people, as you're not supposed to have that in Islam. He still listens to music though, so I don't want to get started on the hypocrisy displayed on a regular basis by him and the Muslim community that I grew up in general. Islam is not a fan of dogs being in a home. My wife and I do not live with my parents. We have our own home, and I told my parents my wife and I would be keeping the dog that she had before we got into a relationship. Now, I love this dog. I thought I got it through to my dad that the dog was here to stay. I even got an imam to talk to him about it. He brought it up again one day while he was over at our house and asked when we were getting rid of the dog. I tell him that we aren't and that he needs to stop asking about it. But this started a big argument between him and me. He went home and I thought again that was the end of it. But I was wrong. When he got home, my brother was there. He told my brother the story, and my brother told him he was wrong to make demands of my wife and I. My dad got into an argument with my brother. It got close to being physical, so my brother left. My brother at the time had his phone service under my parents' family plan. My dad cancelled his number, so I had to call the phone company. I have access since I'm the one who usually manages issues for him. My dad would then cancel the service again, being real petty. I eventually just added my brother to my phone plan. After this incident, my brother then went no contact with both of our parents. That was the last straw for him. He went no contact with our mum because she is an enabler. That requires a different post. To this day, my dad still doesn't understand why my brother is no longer in contact with him. I understood my brother's decision and have not tried to change his mind. I stayed in contact with my dad, but low contact. Second son goes no contact. Now to a couple of weeks ago. My dad and I once again got into an argument. My wife and I have a newborn. I was so excited for my parents to have their first grandchild. As much of a jerk as my dad is and has been, I've seen how well he interacts with my little cousins, and I incorrectly thought being a grandparent may mellow him down. I figured there would be some disagreements, as a lot of grandparents think since they've already raised kids, they know exactly what to do, even if they raised those kids over 25 years ago. But unfortunately, his controlling ways and anger issues reared their ugly head in a bad way. We were over at my parents so they could see my newborn son, and because two of my cousins were visiting to see my newborn son as well. Things went fine until my wife and I were getting ready to leave. My son was being a bit fussy as we were putting him into the car seat. That happens. Babies get fussy and cry a bit. Once we get the car seat in the car and get going, he normally calms down. If he doesn't, we just give him a bottle as he was probably hungry. We'd already changed and burped him at this point. My dad starts saying we should give him gripe water. I tell my dad that the baby is fine, just being a bit fussy. But my dad insists again, so I tell him I'm not giving him gripe water. We asked our pediatrician about it, and our pediatrician said to hold off on gripe water since our baby was still pretty small. Our son was born almost 3 weeks early and is very small, so we are being cautious. We also don't want to give him anything besides breast milk and formula if it's not really necessary, which it was not in this case. This sets my dad off. He goes off about what the frick do doctors know? He raised 2 kids. He gave my brother gripe water when he was 2 days old. Now that's obviously BS because he didn't even know about gripe water until he visited one of his friends and they told him about it. Not only that, but my brother was born late and at a normal weight. His situation is not the same as my son's. And guys, if you didn't know what gripe water is, like me, gripe water is an over-the-counter liquid supplement of a number of nutrients that is good for babies. My dad then does his usual thing of taking one issue, escalating it, and going off about everything. He goes on to say, don't come around anymore, even with the baby. He calls me an Islamic slur, my wife an Islamic slur, and my son an Islamic slur. My mum is trying to calm him down because he's yelling all of these things 2 feet next to me and the car seat my son is in. My teenage cousins are also hearing all of this. At this point, my wife has taken our son out of the apartment and into the hall. I'm trying to leave as well, but my dad continues to yell. He's now moved on to how we have not given him a cent, how he got us educated and put us through college for us to never give him anything back, how we basically don't do anything for him, and some other things that I don't recall exactly. Just a lot of horse poop. I've paid for my parents' cable internet bill for the past 12 years, even though I haven't lived with them for years. I just recently paid for their tickets, which was about $2,800 to go to our home country. And I've paid for other random things, like ordering them pizza when my cousins are over at their house and my mum doesn't feel like cooking. Yeah, he says he got us educated, but he did nothing. He told us he'd pay for our college and then told us after one semester that he wouldn't, basically leaving us in the middle of a semester scrambling. He told my brother that he'd only pay if he agreed to marry a woman from our country. Look, I understand if he doesn't want to pay, but tell us that before we decide on a school so we can make an informed decision. He still brags to his friends that he put us through school though. He says we never do anything for him, even though both of my parents come to me for legal, tax, finance, tech, and basically any issue. Keeping a tally of what you've done for your kids and throwing it in their face is BS. Especially when you've basically done a little over the bare minimum. After taking his yelling right in my face, I left, and I haven't spoken to him since. I told my mum we are not speaking to him, and he is not seeing us anymore. If he gets some therapy and anger management, maybe we can see what happens, but he has to make a change though. Of course, the last time I spoke to my mum, she told me he'd been crying. As usual, he is the victim. Here's to hoping I don't continue this cycle. Wow, and there we go. What a way to end today's episode. Nothing worse than having a father like this. I'm sorry, but that's just my opinion. I don't really want to get into the religious side of this and coupling this dad's actions in line with his religion and saying that the reason that he acts like this is due to his religion and his own upbringing. I mean, it probably is, but I don't really want to go down that route and say that that's a bad or a good thing. I just want to take it at face value. The guy's being controlling and not letting you live your lives. And it just sounds like he's just very, very hypocritical and stubborn and doesn't accept that he also makes mistakes while also not accepting that other people are allowed to make mistakes. It's a weird one, very hypocritical, and it's a shame. If I were UOP, I would just simply say to stop paying for anything for your family, as much as that's quite a tough thing to say or do in your situation, given that you've been doing it for over 12 years. You're not getting anything out of it, and ultimately, you kind of want to unlink yourself from his toxic behavior, especially now that you have your own child and you need to protect him from his grandfather, which is a crazy statement, a very sad one, to be honest, but ultimately, reading through what I've just read through, it is genuinely how I feel. How about this for a news article headline? Florida man arrested for wrestling a fake alligator at a shopping mall. And you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, there's an image here. And what's amazing is that there's also an accompanying video of this, which we're going to get into. But first of all, a Florida teen was arrested for wrestling and damaging a fake alligator at a mall mid-days after he was arrested for attempting a wrestling move on his school principal. I mean, if this picture didn't say enough, I think that is giving us the context that we need. Police didn't have to search hard to track him down, since he shared an Instagram video of himself damaging the display alligator at the Full Shopping Center in Miami. That video, as I said, we're going to watch in just a second. The video, which was later released by police, shows him taking off his shirt, jumping over a fence, and tackling the fake alligator in a shallow pond. The destruction of the display animal, valued at $3,690 took place back on March 30th. And without further ado, I'm delighted to say that here is that video. And here we go. Here is the absolute hoodlum himself. Top off, doing what any good man does and proceeding to do this. So for those of you that are listening on podcast platforms, this random guy, has jumped into a pond with a fake alligator, RKO'd it, is now pinning it to the ground, wrestling style, and that's it. Shock. He was arrested. And there we go. So there we go. A fun little one. Probably the craziest entitled person I've ever come across. And without further ado, let's get into some more normal entitled people stories. Friends infantilizing incestuous mother. Hey Reddit fam, this has nothing to do with me personally. A close friend of mine, who we'll call Jake, asked me to write his story here as he's pretty bad with words and doesn't know how to put his feelings down. He has autism, which wasn't diagnosed until he was already an adult and moved out of his mother's place and went no contact. His mother, who I'll call Wacky Wanda, has always treated Jake like a baby, from the time he was born up until he went no contact with her. He tells me that as far back as he can remember, she would make him wear bibs at the dinner table and always hand feed him. She claimed it was because he was a special child that needed the extra help. His father, Frank, would always chastise Wanda for this, saying that he would never grow up if she kept babying him. She'd get annoyed though and tell him that he was being ridiculous and that she loved her baby boy so much. Way too much, if you ask me. Jake began to believe that he was developmentally challenged because of her. Wanda would show up at his school and throw a fit when the teachers wouldn't pull Jake out of class to see her. He began to deal with bullying from other kids who would call him a mama's boy and tease him about wanting his mummy all of the time. As Jake got older, he started fighting back against the bullying. Eventually, he started yelling at his mum. Whenever she would show up at school, he'd tell her to go home and leave him alone. This never went down well, and he tells me that she would sit alone in her room and pout, crying about how he'd hurt her feelings. He'd always apologize and she would coo at him and pinch his cheeks and say that she couldn't stay mad at him because he was her baby boy and he was all she had in life, completely forgetting that she had a husband, by the way. So frickin' manipulative. Once Jake was a teenager, Jake started acting out and becoming more independent from his mum. I don't know if everyone knows this, but not all autistic people are built the same. Jake is a very good-looking guy. He's one of those too pretty to look at type of guys. He started rebelling by getting his dad to let him get tattoos. He started smoking cigarettes and pot and began hanging out with the goth and morbid crowd in high school. He listened to heavy metal music, wearing a leather jacket, eyeliner, and black nail polish. His black hair was always cropped short and he smoothed it back with gel. And from the pictures I saw, wowee, even I said if I'd seen that walking by me, I'd be turning my head to check him out. That gave him an ego boost. Not to mention, he's very good looking even without the makeup. Now, Wacky Wanda hated Jake's style and said it made him look like a clown and that his beautiful skin was too precious to destroy with tattoos and makeup. She threw his clothes away more than once, replacing them with clothes that she approved of. Frank would always take him to the mall so he could buy new ones, and Jake took pleasure out of throwing out the clothes that Wacky Wanda gave him. She would still make them eat dinner at the table every night. She was one of those women that was very traditional about family dinner. They always sat down and she put a bib on Jake and hand-fed him his meal until he was finished. She would even spit on a napkin and wipe his face if he got anything on it. Jake noticed that whenever she did this, she would side-eye Frank with a smirk, like she wanted him to be jealous or something. Weird. The last time they ate together as a family, as soon as Jake sat down, she pulled out the bib. He tried to ask her not to do this as he was 16 and fully capable of feeding himself. She chastised him and told him to do as he was told. The bibs were too small and wouldn't even fit around his neck. He tried to tell her this, but she would just sit it on his chest, then start hand feeding him by making plane noises. Jake tore the bib off and told her enough was enough. He was 16 years old and he didn't need to be fed like a baby. Wacky Wanda got upset and started whining, but Frank suddenly blew up and told her to stop with this because this was getting too creepy even for him to tolerate. He tried to support her in the dread that her son was getting older and no longer needed her, but this was too much to take. Jake went to his room and didn't come out for the rest of the night. Wacky Wanda pouted and cried for more than a day in hopes of making Jake apologize for refusing her, but he refused. She realized she was losing the battle with keeping her son a baby forever. So, time to amp up the crazy. Jake came home from school the next day and found his mum in the kitchen, dressed up in all black eyeliner and lipstick, and she even dyed her hair black. She had spiked bracelets and a choker. She looked ridiculous. How I wish I could have seen a picture of this because it sounded hilarious. Jake was shocked and asked her just what the frick she was doing. He noticed the shirt she was wearing was cut way too low, and he could see way more cleavage than he was comfortable with. She bounded over to him and asked him if he liked it. He was too shocked to respond with what he wanted to say and said, "Sure." He tells me that she would push out her breasts towards him in an effort to make him look. What is going on? For months after that, that was all his mum, by the way guys, remember that, would dress like. She would openly brag to her friends that Jake copied her style and she was so proud of him. She used to wear turtlenecks and mum jeans with slip-on shoes. She was the furthest thing from a goth or a punk that you could imagine. One night, Jake was asleep. She climbed into bed with him and tried to cuddle with him. He woke up and felt someone touching him inappropriately. He turned around and saw Wacky Wanda. He freaked out and told her to get the frick out of his room. She pouted and cried until Jake went to leave. He noticed then that his door was locked and he had to unlock it to get out. He had to lock himself in the bathroom and she sat outside the door, begging him to come and sleep with her. Jake shouted at her that she was touching him inappropriately and that it wasn't okay and it was weird that she did this with the door locked. She screamed that that was how mummies show their love until Frank came out of their room to yell at her for the way she was acting and that it was creepy for a mother to want to cuddle her 16-year-old son with the door locked. She screamed that he didn't understand the bond that she and Jake had and that he was jealous. Jake screamed that they had no bond. Wacky Wanda cried and Frank shouted at her to move away from the door or he'd do something he might regret later. He took Jake and they went to sleep at a motel for the night. Jake told his dad everything that happened. Frank finally had enough. He couldn't stand the weird and creepy behavior from Wacky Wanda anymore. He filed for divorce and got custody of Jake, and Jake's mum was given visitation rights. Wacky Wanda was mandated to attend parenting classes and therapy, and she actually went, under the threat of losing any and all rights to her son, of course. But she staunchly refused to believe she'd ever done anything wrong. Jake dreaded visitation, but as he was still a minor, he had no choice in the matter. He'd go and make sure to lock his door to prevent her from coming in. She did give him space when he was at her house for a while. When Jake was 17, his dad paid for him to enroll in driver's ed and got him a car. This went over like a fart in a church because Wacky Wanda was annoyed when Jake pulled up to our house in a brand spanking new car. She lost it and called out Frank to scream at him about how she was endangering her baby boy. He hung up on her. Things got worse once Jake started seeing a girl at school. She was a pretty blonde girl that dressed in similar fashion to Jake. When Wacky Wanda found out, she went insane. Jake was in his room sleeping and his mum picked the lock. It was one of those push-in locks that a bobby pin can easily pick. What Jake told me next made my heart drop. She undressed herself and climbed into bed with him and began S.A.ing him. Oh my... Wow. I mean, I know it said incestuous in the title, but... Gee, what the hell? He woke up and freaked out. He ran away from the house and drove back to his dad's in tears, and they called the police. Wacky Wanda got arrested and imprisoned for 11 years. Jake became severely depressed and tried to unalive himself more than once. His dad put him into therapy and he got better over time, but he still struggles with everything his mother had done to him. Jake was formally then diagnosed with autism and he's on medication that keeps him functional. He's one of the bartenders at my club and we're really close friends. He's best friends with my boyfriend, Kyle. Jake has a girlfriend who is one of the sweetest women I've ever met. Jake and I have a connection because we both have experienced SA from relatives. Oh my goodness. And we both are stronger for having gone through that. Sorry this was so long, but he wanted his story shared with everyone. Oh my word. Okay guys, well, you know I said that the first story, the first news article, sorry, I'm a little bit speechless if you couldn't tell. I said that I said once again that the news article that I mentioned and we saw the video of in the first part of this episode was one of the most crazy, again, I actually can't speak, one of the craziest things I've ever seen, one of the most entitled things I've ever seen. I now might have to revoke that statement because of what I've just read. Does that even count as entitled? I don't know. It's obviously way more serious than that. Perhaps entitled to feel like your child should always be your baby throughout all of these years in his entire life. I don't know. There's something going on upstairs, I mean mentally, with Wacky Wanda's brain. Just some sort of complex that she wants to keep her child as an infant for as long as possible. I mean, I thought it was bad enough with making your son, your 16-year-old son, wear a bib and then feeding him yourself with, you know, that plain stuff that you do with a child, or, I mean, not a child, let's be honest, a baby. Or at the most a toddler. But then it got completely serious. All I can say is that it's very good that you called the police and that she is now in prison. But the damage has been done. That's the unfortunate thing. Thankfully, it seems as though Wacky Wanda's son is getting through this with therapy and his amazing friendship group, support group. His dad seems great, Frank seems great, and he's got a great girlfriend. But As I said, the damage has been done, and unfortunately, he's going to have to live with this for the rest of his life. Also, OP, I'm so sorry to hear that you've gone through that as well. Why? What is this? It's actually unbelievable that this sort of stuff exists in the world. Oh, man. Without further ado, let's get in to our next entitled people story. Husband buys coffee machine, upset that he has to use it. My husband loves coffee. He is the only one in the house who drinks it. Tea and coffee gives me acidity and insomnia, so I don't drink it. Recently, he bought a fancy machine that makes delicious coffee. The only problem is that the coffee trickles down drop by drop. It takes around 4 to 5 minutes to fill a tumbler, but can feel like forever if you have nothing else to do but stand there and watch it trickle down. I get the coffee machine going every morning while getting our dear daughter ready for school and making her breakfast. When he comes down after getting ready, my husband's tumbler is ready to go. He leaves, then I take our daughter to school, come back and work from home. So recently, I had an injury that left me bedridden. Luckily, it was my daughter's midterm break, so there was no pressure of getting up early to prepare her meal and take her to school. The only thing left was the coffee. My husband says, "No problem, I will make it myself." Day 1, 2, and 3, he makes the coffee and also cleans the machine after every use. But day 4, "This is too much and it's wasting my time." I reply to him, "Why don't you switch on the machine tomorrow and get back upstairs to get ready?" We live in a duplex, bedroom and dressing room upstairs, kitchen and living room downstairs. Also, he has now stopped cleaning the machine. Day 5, he is upset because he had to run up and down twice to tend to his coffee. My next suggestion, move your toiletries to the downstairs washroom for a few days so you can get ready there. "I'm not comfortable with that," he replied. Well, now the only solution left is to wake up earlier. Days 6, 7, and 8, he wakes up early to make his coffee. He no longer cleans the machine. Come the evening of day 8, "I'm very tired. My sleep cycle is whacked." "Well, looks like you need to make more coffee," I say. Day 9, he is now side-eyeing me and guilt-tripping me, hoping I would crawl down the stairs to make his coffee. Not happening. So, he calls up the maid and tells her to start coming early to make his coffee. She's a part-time helper, and there's no way she'll come this early. By day 10, he's given up. Now he's buying his coffee from outside, and the machine remains unused. I tell you what, that is the sort of man that you want to marry. You've literally married a 6-year-old in a man's body. Congratulations. I mean, I don't mean that in a bad way. That's obviously tough for you. But if this man cannot make his own coffee every morning, and it takes too long, then what else is he not doing? That's my question. I mean, there are a lot more serious things and a lot of things that take a lot more time than making a coffee every morning. I'll be honest, I do it myself. And here's the evidence on screen right now. A lovely mug to match my lovely top. And it takes about a minute. I clean out my machine, I put in beans and water, and then I press start. Unbelievable scenes. It really is. And incredibly, a machine makes it for me, and then I go and get it. It really is that easy. Just laziness. Laziness personified by an entitled man. And now for our final entitled people story of this episode. A stolen dress. My mother sadly died when I was 12. At the moment of our death, our family could have been the stuff of movies. We'd not seen our father in a couple of years, and we were well used to a life without any adult input. I'd found my mother dead, called the ambulance, and the neighbours all witnessed the spectacle. By afternoon, there were her friends going through her closet. Before illness had stolen it, my mother's true pride was her looks. She was beautiful, with stunning red hair. Even after the ravages of her illness, she was still very pretty. She had a green silk dress that was a treasure from the times before everything went bad. In that dress, she could still silence a room. I stood at her bedroom door and I watched these women try on her clothes. One of them grabbed the emerald dress and immediately the women started to fight over the prize. They all wanted it. One woman claimed it, but then another grabbed it out of her hand and immediately locked it in her car. Attention took over the room. I stood and watched, powerless. Remember guys, OP is 12 here. The hyenas who did not get the dress started to bargain their pilfered loot to exchange for the dress, but no deals were made. Word of my mum's death must have gotten to the high school, and my older siblings were now walking in the door. My brother was a successful drug dealer who at 17 ruled our house. We all feared him. Even her friends knew he was dangerous. He'd once taken a gun to my mother's head. Seeing him approach the house, the women stopped what they were doing and we all held our breath. But he did not come inside, so they returned to their looting. In the moment, I totally forgot that I was afraid of him. I forgot that I believed he hated us. I forgot the gun. I showed him and my older sister the dress locked in the vulture's car. Mum's stuff was piled on the seats of various friends' cars, but we were all focused on that dress. I went back in to witness the harvest of our home. On the day of the funeral, my brother was a different kid. He stood tall and brave. He made sure to escort each and every one of those vultures up to see our mother laid out in the coffin, adorned in the green dress. And there we go, a slightly more positive story to end this episode. I mean, I don't know. Is that positive? Some of the imagery I had there of women in your dead mother's bedroom stealing her clothes when she's literally just died hours before is pretty unbelievable. And the fact that your brother, despite, doing a good thing at the end, held a gun to your mother's head. Some of the characters we've met in today's episode have been nothing short of sensational, I will say. Very strange. Now, I don't know if you guys know this. I don't know if I ever actually tell you this, or if I have told you this before, but I don't ever try to read the stories in full before I narrate them, because I want to kind of experience them live at the same time as you lot, right? That's more fun. If I read them and I knew what was going to happen, it would take away a bit of the fun for me. I obviously check them to see if they're good, but I don't read them word for word. I just have a little brief overview. And let me say, I didn't realize that all of these stories were going to end like they did. But hey, that is what's a good word? I can't even think of a word to describe this subreddit and some of the stories on there. Just at times bamboozling. We'll leave it at that. I believe my parents resent me for starting my own family. I had somewhat of a revelation this weekend. I'm still processing how I feel about it and considering if I should confront my parents. Anyway, here it is. I believe my parents resent me for starting my own family. I am a 40-year-old man and I come from a big family. I'm the second oldest of 9 kids. My older sister, Jane, is just a year older than me. There is a 6-year gap between me and the next sibling, then my mum had a kid every 2 to 3 years. Since Jane and I were the oldest, we always helped with the little kids and the chores around the house. In fact, it was common for my parents and other adults to refer to us as Jane and OP and the kids. It's like Jen and I were not considered children, it's more like we were 2 other adults living in the house. We were homeschooled, so we were home all the time. Part of my job was that I would wake up, make breakfast for the kids, then get them started with their school or activities before I started my own schoolwork. Jane would sleep in because she was more of a night owl, and it was her job to help at night with the baby, because there was always a baby. Jane and I did most of the chores around the house. We took turns either cleaning the kitchen or doing the laundry, of which there was a lot. I did all the guy stuff, like mowing the yard and taking out the trash. As I got older, I would delegate some of these chores to my younger brothers, but it was still my responsibility to make sure it got done. Once I was old enough to drive, I would run errands and take the kids everywhere. I can't tell you how many times I would take the kids to things like playdates or doctor's appointments. I would often tuck the kids in bed and tell them stories. To me, these things were all just normal, but looking back on it, I was more like a second dad to the kids than a brother. Jane and I did have a lot of freedom as teenagers to go out with our friends, if the chores were done. We didn't have cell phones back then. If we wanted to go out, we'd just tell our parents we were going and they didn't care as long as we were back by the next morning. I moved out when I was 20, but I still spent a lot of time at my parents', and one of my younger siblings was almost always at my house. One brother, JJ, pretty much lived with me since he was 14 because he and our mum didn't get along. When JJ was 17, he got in a wreck and he called me instead of calling dad because I was just the one who handled those kind of things. During all of this time, my parents always talked about how important it was for Jane and I to help with the kids because they were so busy with their ministry. I can't count how many times I had to drop what I was doing to take care of something because mum or dad were counseling someone. Sorry, I feel like I'm rambling. I hope I've painted an accurate picture of my childhood. Let's move on. Now, I'd not really dated much, but when I was 25, I met and started dating Anne. We fell in love fast and got married less than a year later. My younger siblings love Anne. She's a great cook and hostess. Our house became the hangout spot. My younger siblings started calling her Mama Anne, something they still do to this day. We've now been married 15 years and have 2 kids of our own. My mum and Jane did not like Anne. Now, Jane and Anne get along okay today, but Anne and my mum do not have a good relationship. I never understood why, but I think I finally figured out it's because they see it as Anne having taken me away. As Anne and I focused on our own relationship and started a family of our own, I spent less and less time doing things for my parents. My dad liked Anne at first, but over the past few years, their relationship has soured. Throughout the years, my dad has made comments to me about keeping up my responsibilities. One time, he called me about one of the younger kids who'd gotten in a fight with my mum and said, "You better get your brother to change his attitude. It's not okay how he treated your mum, and you are going to make him apologize." Sorry, he's the dad in all of this. Okay. A few years ago, Anne and I set some boundaries with my parents, telling them we were not going to raise or discipline their kids. Our home is always open to my siblings, but we no longer let my parents try and use us to straighten them up. My parents have not taken this well. About a year ago, Anne injured her foot and couldn't walk for a while. Just as she was getting better, I was diagnosed with kidney disease, which then turned into kidney failure. I've had several surgeries, with another one coming up in a few weeks. It's been a rough year. During this time, my parents have not only refused to help, they've actively made things harder for us. Things like promising to help with our kids but then cancelling at the last minute, usually because something ministry related came up. Recently, my sister-in-law, who lives in another state, had a baby, and my mum has been staying with her and helping for the past 6 weeks. My sister-in-law has said that mum is a godsend and is so wonderful. My dad has gone to help every weekend. This hurts me because my mum wouldn't give us a single night to help with our youngest when he was born. Anyway, I'm sorry this post has turned out longer than I thought it would. I needed to get this off my chest. This weekend I was talking to another sister and telling her how I don't understand why mum and dad don't treat me like they do the rest of the kids. Even Jane. It's like I'm not one of their children, and it just kind of hit me that they resent me for getting married and starting my own family and leaving them to raise their own kids. Part of me is relieved to finally realize why they treat me like they do, and part of me is sad. I'm kind of scared about this upcoming surgery, and I really wish I had a parent I could talk to about it. But I don't feel like I have parents, just some people that I co-parented my siblings with. Okay, guys, I don't even know where to begin with this one. There's so much to get through. What I will say off the bat is that there is an update to this post. It was posted on Reddit just a couple of days later, so that will be very interesting to see what happened, and we'll get into that in just a few seconds. But for now, reading that, wow, it feels like you just didn't even have parents growing up. I don't really understand why they had this sort of response to you as a child, but then for the rest of your siblings, they didn't, and they were okay to actually seemingly parent them. I just don't get it. Just because you're the oldest child, it doesn't mean that it's your responsibility to look after your other siblings. That's insane. Of course, like, it's to be expected that there is a little bit more responsibility placed on the oldest child, especially when they become of age to have that sort of responsibility. But this is just you being substituted in for your parents. What are they actually doing? Just doing their jobs, and you're being forced to actually do the parenting in this entire family? It's insane. If anything, it's bordering on abuse. Maybe you starting your own family was the catalyst to them realizing how much they were relying on you and how much they were just using you. But then again, I say that, and surely they realized this all along. Like, it doesn't even seem if they were doing anything. You were the one who had to wake the kids up in the morning, your siblings that is, and get them ready for school. And then you the second oldest sibling, your sister, had to do all the stuff at night. What were your parents actually doing this entire time? I just don't get it. Now, I'm not entirely sure about what exactly ministry means in this situation. I don't really want to guess, but just from a little bit of research, it might be a religious thing. At least that's what people are saying in the comments, and that would make the most sense. But even still, what kind of, I guess, is happening here is your parents are just using their religious work and their beliefs as a way to offset the fact that they're just not doing anything and placing the entire burden of 5 of their children on you and Jane, which is actually insane. Nonetheless, that is part 1, the original post, and thankfully, we do have an update, so let's get straight into that. So then, I spoke with my wife, Anne, about it last night. I said something along the lines of, I've realised that my parents resent me for starting my own family and not helping them as much, and that is why they treat me so differently. And I think you've been trying to gently tell me this for years, but I was too dense to get it. We were sitting in the bed at the time, and she leaned over and patted me on the head and said, "You are so pretty." I laughed for like 10 minutes. It was a great emotional release. A lot of you said she sounds wonderful, and she really is. I just can't express how much I love her. About Jane, my older sister. Jane did get married and start a family about 2 years after I did. Jane and I had a falling out and didn't speak for several years, but we're okay now, just not very close. Our falling out was more about religion than anything. She is very religious like my parents, while I am not. I'm religious and we attend church, but it's not our whole life like it is for my parents and Jane. Okay, so I think this probably was to do with religion. Well, at least your parents' work OP was religious. Younger siblings. The youngest is 22, so they're all adults now. The second to youngest passed away several years ago, so there are 8 of us now. Wait, sorry, were there 9? Oh, maybe 8 in the family, right? Oh, sorry, no, I completely forgot. Yes, second oldest of 9 kids, OP said. Wow, that makes it even worse. So OP and Jane were looking after 7 kids. Goodness me. Anyway, back to the update. I'm very close with all of my younger siblings. They still come hang out at my house all the time, and they are all great aunts and uncles to my kids. All of them, including Jane, are upset with how my parents treated me this past year. So then, help with my kids. While I am disappointed in my parents for not helping, I do not need their help. Anne and I have close friends, plus we both have siblings that help. Anne's parents live far away, but they help when they can. We really are okay, and we feel very blessed and loved with all the help we've received. Therapy. Part of my kidney treatment plan includes access to a therapist, and I love her. She's been great in helping me learn to live with an illness. I'm not sure if she is the right person to speak with about my parents, but I'll ask her and see if she can refer someone if not. I'll wait until after my surgery to bring this up, as I need to just focus on that right now. Setting boundaries. When I say my parents won't help, it's not that they say they won't help, it's that they offer to help and then either bail at the last minute, or they change the plan so much that it causes Anne and I a lot of stress. To be honest, if anything, that is even worse. A few months ago, Anne was sick, and my mother offered to pick our kids up from school. It's a long story, but she kept changing things and making it very complicated, and my youngest ended up being left alone for a little while, and he got scared. There we go. After that, I had a harsh talk with my parents and told them how disappointed I was in them and how I needed to focus on my health, and they were making things worse. I told them they are not allowed to take my kids anywhere, and they're not allowed to just drop by at my house. And in fact, they were not even allowed to offer to help, because my mum doesn't take no for an answer and will nag until she wears me down. My parents were mad about this, but all 7 of my siblings took my side and rallied about me. And so my parents have respected that so far. Going no contact. A lot of people recommended going no contact. I don't want that. I still love my parents, even though they've not been great parents. My kids love them too, and I don't want to take that away. They are good grandparents when they show up. I don't think my parents are awful people. I think they had this vision of how they wanted to have this big family and this big ministry, and I think they just didn't realize the responsibilities they put on Jane and I. I've spoken to them in the past and expressed how it was messed up that they put so much on us as kids, and they have apologized. Putting my parents on blast at their church. Several people recommended going to their church and telling people how they've treated me. You don't understand this church. They would praise my parents for putting God and the ministry above everything else. These super religious people are crazy. I guess that's it for now. My surgery is in less than 2 weeks, so I'm going to focus on that. I'm going to put this thing with my parents on the back burner, and later I'll decide what, if anything, I'm going to do. Thanks again to everyone for your comments. It's really helped me work through some feelings. And there we go. I guess for now at least. That's it. I really like the point that OP has made about not wanting to go no contact, because I feel like a lot of the time on this subreddit, we do see Redditors just jumping to that conclusion, and a lot of comments saying, just go no contact. It will be so much easier. But it's actually nice to see. And I think, if anything, a little bit more realistic to see a user that knows that their parents haven't been great. If anything, they've been pretty terrible. But you know, they're still their parents and they still love them. There's that, you know, unequivocal love that you can't just take away from somebody. So it's nice to see that. And as long as you put those boundaries in place, OP, those boundaries that you said you have, I think that's completely fair. I will also say a massive good luck and a hope that the surgery goes well. Having to deal with health issues and then all of this on top is awful. As I mentioned whilst reading this, I think actually that the fact that your parents say they're going to help and then either change all the plans or pull out last second is much worse than just saying they're not going to help in the first place, because that gives you no time to make other plans or to get other people in place to help, like your friends and other siblings, right? As you said, your child got scared, your youngest child got scared because of your parents. That is just terrible. And I get the fact that they've apologized, but an apology in words is one thing. Actually doing something about it and changing your ways is another. And ultimately, even if they've apologized, you know, profusely, there's nothing they can really do to change the fact that they've not been very good parents for your entire life. It appears that we are back. Now, I didn't expect us to be back in this costume anytime soon. Great. If you are watching on YouTube, you will see exactly what I'm wearing right now. That's right. I'm back in the wig, the sunnies, and the horrible red lipstick. I'm not gonna lie, I think I've done a worse job even than last time. It's not even close to just being on my lip. Like, it's all over my chin. I mean, it's truly disgraceful. And that's why I absolutely love it. You want my dog? Well, I think it's fairly safe to assume that I've lost a couple of friends over this, but it wasn't me that did it. This weekend, a friend of mine asked me to keep an eye on her 2 kids while she and her hubby went away for the weekend for some couple time. Her mother was initially going to watch the kids, but fell through on short notice. She called me at 3 p.m. on Friday to come over in 3 hours, and my friend knew I probably wasn't doing anything, which was both hurtful and accurate. I said sure. She's got 2 kids, a girl who is 8 and a boy who is 5. They're good kids for the most part. The boy has a little bit of a snitching problem and the girl has a sharing problem, but it's 2 days. So I show up Friday after work while my friend gives me the rundown, and her husband tells the kids he will beat them with their sibling if they're bad. The kids were unimpressed. The parents leave and it's just me and the kids in the house, and it's immediate pandemonium. The brother snitches on his sister for taking an extra cookie. The sister cries to me that her brother touched her Switch, and I make the executive decision that they've got too much energy, and if they're tuckered out, they'll hopefully chill. So I asked the kids to track down bathing suits because we're going to my gym, which has a pool and a guest policy. I did let mum know what we were up to before we left and asked if it was okay if I brought my dog over. He doesn't shed and is house trained. She said that was fine. Let me just rearrange the wig real quick. Hair. And we'll carry on. Operation Pool was a great success, though the locker room got a bit dicey. There's a whole other story there. Once everyone was appropriately tired, including me, we made a pit stop on the way back to their house to grab my pooch. He's extremely well behaved and loves kids, and both kids were immediately all about the Dexter, and the Dexter was all about the kids. Ground rules: no pulling on his fur, and he goes where he wants. The kids kind of struggle with the notion that a dog is not a toy. I obviously kept him out of places where he wasn't supposed to go, but I'm a grown-up. Allegedly. Miraculously, after the swim and chasing the dog around the house, that left the kids too pooped to pop, and both fell asleep watching a Disney film on the TV. After the movie, I woke the kids up to trot off to bed and didn't make them brush their teeth. For the record, the son did indeed yeet me under a bus when mummy called in the morning. I told the kiddos that if they left their door open, Dexter might sneak in and give them cuddles. I increased the likelihood of this by sleeping on the couch and not leaving him a spot. He expressed his displeasure with me by flouncing off and going into the boys' room to sleep. Great success. Saturday, we went for a hike in the morning, had a nap, and then played ball with the dog, and generally had a pretty chill day. Diffused the sharing issue by explaining to the girl that the pup has feelings and wants, just like any person, and she can't control him that way. She appeared thoughtful, and then immediately started yelling at her brother for hogging the dog again. At least she wasn't mad at the dog. I successfully heated up the casserole that mum had left me for dinner, following her carefully laid out instructions, admonished the kids to not give him people food, and was soundly ignored. I did draw the line at a couple morsels from each kid and put my foot down. More than that, and he's gonna get the runs, and nobody wants that. That night, I made sure sister got a turn, by again hogging the couch and also closing the boy's door, since he got a turn already. The girl was smug. The boy made me call his mum. Mum wasn't happy that my dog was in her kids' beds. I reminded her that he doesn't shed and can't smell worse than the kids, and her daughter might burn the house down with us inside if she doesn't get a turn. Mum accepted defeat. Saturday night was again relatively peaceful. Sorry, I've had to stop there. Just got hair in my mouth. Saturday night was again relatively peaceful, though toothbrushing did happen. And so normally, right, I would have a break after reading a little bit and have a drink and, kind of refresh the mouth. I don't even want to put my lips on my drink now. What do? We just have to carry on with a dry mouth. I can try, but it's just gonna be strawberry lipstick. I honestly don't want to, but I'm gonna have to. Yeah, it just tastes of strawberry as well. Does that ruin the lipstick? I don't care. Okay, we'll just leave that there and carry on. Early Sunday morning, I got woken up by having my dog step on my testicles, which is a thing he's really good at, and he was mad at me for not leaving any room. I made room. Apparently, the girl tried to do something he didn't like and he noped out of there. She wasn't happy about that, but was appeased by my pain enough to go back to bed. This morning was relatively chill. Some more playing with the dog and some team tug of war, and mum and dad got back around lunchtime and thanked me for keeping their kids in one piece. The kids said bye to the pup and there were tears, and I loaded up myself and my dog and went back home to enjoy the relative peace and quiet. Yeah, I wish it ended there. Maybe an hour after we got home, I get a phone call from a very frazzled sounding mum with kids crying in the background. She says, they need my dog now. I'm sorry, what? You don't need a dog, you need my dog? Like, I don't need to come back and visit soon, you just want him? Well, the kids got so attached and they won't stop crying about missing the dog, and her and her husband don't have time for 2 kids and a puppy, and more guilt-inducing word vomit that was having precisely 0 effect on me. Abso-fluffin' not. Click. Still getting texts about being reasonable and you have time to train a new dog. 48 hours of free babysitting isn't enough? You want my dog too? Not in this lifetime. Now, thankfully, we do have some dog tags, so for those of you watching on YouTube, enjoy this. A cute little pup. However, there is also an update and some clarification. The parents did offer to pay me for my time over the weekend, but the rate for 2 full days of childcare was kind of a lot, and they don't have a lot of disposable income. It was an emergency and I had nothing better to do with my time. I told them not to sweat it. Well, that is very nice of you. My pup is chipped and still sleeping off his big weekend, but he's going nowhere solo, and I do have cameras up. I'm gonna sneeze, I'm getting so much hair on my schnoz. Ugh. How do people deal with this haircut, honestly? I also texted my friend's husband, asking him what the frick happened and why does his wife want my dog this morning? He replied back with a lot of question marks, genuinely hoping that sanity breaks out and we can move past this. But ain't nobody pup-napping my dog. Also, for those curious about the story of what happened at my gym's locker room, wow, OP has left a story, which, you know what? Let's do it. Let's get into it. Now, before we do, just want to give my brief thoughts on that story so far. Crazy set of entitled parents, but I'll be honest, my focus at points there was more just on the hair and it not going into my strawberry-lipped mouth. You know, forgive me if my full attention wasn't on that story. What I will say though is, yeah, crazy parents. The fact of the matter is, this woman has given you 48 hours of free childcare. That is insane. I mean, how much money have you saved there? Hundreds of dollars or pounds or whatever currency it is. But yet you say, no, my children can't just get over the fact that they're gonna miss a dog. Shock, children miss things when they get taken away from them. Who would have known? Instead, we're gonna need you to come back, give us your dog, and leave. Sounds pretty reasonable. Okay then, now for the gym story. This is a family locker room for families. So to recap, I was placed in possession of a pair of kids, an 8-year-old girl and 5-year-old boy, on turbo short notice over the weekend. On Friday, as soon as the parents left, pandemonium reigned, and I knew I needed to get the energy out of the kids or I'd be dead by Sunday. So I had them collect bathing suits and we all went to my gym, which has a guest policy and a pool. I got the kids signed in as my guests for the evening, and I asked a bit uncomfortably what the correct thing to do would be, given I was in charge of a boy and a girl. The girl at the front desk laughed a little at me and said that the family locker rooms were down the same hallway as the women's locker rooms. It felt very, very odd walking down the forbidden hallway, but true to her word, there were 2 big doors. One that said families and one that said women. The boy kid really wanted to wander into the women's locker room, which got vetoed almost immediately. We get in there and there's stools inside for changing. Basically a closet with a changing room door on it. Me being hyper aware that anything going even slightly wrong in relation to someone else's naked child is a very, very bad place for misunderstandings, decided that we'd take turns. The girl would go first, get out of her clothes, change into her suit, and then come and hang with me while her brother did the same. And then, when it was my turn, I'd best be seeing 2 pairs of ankles under the door the whole time, or someone's getting left in the locker room hung by their bathing suits. Now, happily enough, nothing went wrong. On our end, anyway. Unfortunately, while the girl was changing, a mum and her son came into the family locker room and looked confused. "Why are you and your son just standing there?" she says. "Oh, I'm just watching the kids and his sister is changing. They're not my children. I figured this was safest for everyone," I say, thinking, oh god no, please, it's Friday. But she rears back in shock, raises her voice, and says, and now I have the perfect attire for this. They're not your children? Nope, I just borrowed them so their mum could get some alone time with dad. At this point, the little dude is hiding behind me and the clothing rustling from the little girl has stopped. Mom, I'm just trying to get them changed and into the pool. I can't take a little girl into the men's locker room, I say, thinking that I'm not exactly comfortable in there myself. I can't imagine it would go well with a little girl. This is a family locker room for families, not for babysitters. And who thought you were mature enough to watch 2 kids on their own? I'm getting you removed. She then yanks her child out behind her to go and yell at someone at the front desk. I can't lie, this is very itchy now. The boy tugged on my pants and looked up at me. I think that lady is crazy. I looked down at the little dude and nodded, but made a shush sound and told the girl to get changed pronto. The woman didn't come back in, and the kids didn't wander off while I was getting changed. We had a great time in the pool, and I didn't see the kid or his mum while we were in the pool or after. I don't know what happened. There was a different desk attendant when we left. And there we go. That is the conclusion of that story. I mean, I thought that the original on its own was bad enough. You having to deal with someone literally trying to steal your dog. But during that same weekend, you had to deal with another entitled parent, another Karen. I mean, I know I'm dressed like this, but wow. That sounds terrible. I will say, fair play to getting through it, OP. Great set of stories. But yeah, for now, we're going to carry on. This honestly feels like more difficult than last time. Has the hair gotten longer or something in the cupboard? It feels just... Look at this. Why is it so long and so sexy at the same time? Now for our next entitled parent story. Entitled mum thinks adults only doesn't apply to her kid at resort pool. Gets removed by staff. My husband and I are currently vacationing at a 5-star hotel. There are 2 separate pools, one for kids, families, and the Serenity/quiet one for adults. 21 plus is enforced. Both pools are very clearly marked as such by large signs placed around the perimeters of each. We've been here for a few days and it's been literal paradise. We've not run into many families or kids, and those that we did were exceptionally well behaved and attended to by their parents. Until today. We went to the adult pool and got set up on 2 chairs. The pool was in front of us and the hot tub was behind us. It was a tad chilly, so we ventured over to the hot tub where we saw a kid, about 7, playing with a load of Star Wars toys on the steps. Call me a Karen, I don't care, but this set me off. We came to this resort specifically because of the 2 very separate pools with enforced rules. I want to relax. I don't feel like hearing screaming kids on vacation. You know what? I will call you a Karen, but not really. That is actually completely fair. I went over to the attendant stand and asked if the hot tub was for families. And if so, was there an adults only hot tub that we might be directed to? I knew the answer, I just didn't want to come across as too aggressive. I was told that the hot tub was, indeed, for adults only. So I proceeded to tell both pool attendants that there was a child in the hot tub and I didn't know if his parent was nearby. Guys, both pool attendants were basically like, heck no, and walked very fast over to the hot tub and told a woman who was apparently the mother, the entitled mum, of the child that it was adults only and they had to leave. The kid was told to get out. Crying and screaming ensued, and he and the mum then just sat on the chairs. But wait, there's more. After about 5 to 10 minutes, they were still sitting on the chairs in the adult area, and again, the attendant came over and informed them that the area was adults only, and they're not even allowed to sit there, even if they're not actively using the hot tub. The entitled mum was fuming. She angrily packed up their stuff, and both were ushered out of the adults area. I suspect they were there because the kids' pool area was super busy and the entitled mum didn't want to deal with other kids and or couldn't score a chair. We tipped the attendants generously on our way out and are already planning our next vacation here. I wish more businesses would realise that not everyone wants to commingle with families and their kids. Yeah, you know what? That's completely fair. And I have to say big respect to the hotel and the staff for really enforcing their rules. It's one thing having these rules set up on the website and enticing people like UOP to go there in the knowledge that hopefully at least things will be separated. You'll be able to have your alone time while families and kids can, enjoy themselves in the same place, but in a different location. But actually doing it and being this quick to say, no, this is wrong. We've said all this stuff. We have to enforce it. That's another thing. And that's really good to see. I rate it. And yes, just to be completely 100%, you're definitely not the Karen here. You've paid for this entire experience, which has said that you're going to be separated from kids and families, and you're not having that experience. Of course you're allowed to say, can something be done here? And it duly was. Oh, and you know what? There are actually a couple of interesting edits to this one. The best part is that this particular hotel has kids programming all day, a kids club, and the kids and family pool is actually much bigger and nicer than the adults pool. It also has kids water attractions, like ones you'd see at a splash pad, a huge bucket that spills water, water guns, fountains, bubblers, etc. Why would you not be there? Oh, I know, because the mother is an entitled, selfish jerk who didn't care about her kids' enjoyment or that of the adults around her. And amazingly, another edit too, by the way, I've got to say that makes complete sense and completely explains why the mother was in the area she was in. It happened again today. We were at the adult pool again this morning, and a mother pushing a stroller with another kid in tow tried to sneak in the side entrance of the adult pool area. Not so fast. The same attendant from before stopped them and escorted them out so fast their heads must have been spinning. The kids' pool is absolute madness right now with it being Mother's Day and there aren't many chairs left, so I'm guessing she thought the rules don't apply to her. This amazing attendant will be getting another generous tip today. That, once again, is amazing to see. And now for our final entitled parent story of this episode. Now this one is a little bit more serious than the others, just word of warning. My mother's husband acts like he has rights to see my daughter. I, a 21-year-old woman, made the decision to cut my stepfather out of my life completely. I also made the choice that he will not be seeing my daughter, period. He was so abusive to me growing up and pretended the abuse didn't happen. He constantly gaslights me. He mentally and emotionally abused me. When I was having mental problems, my stepdad convinced my mother I was lying. He'd call me names and make fun of me for not knowing how to do things that I wasn't taught how to do. He'd tell me how stupid I am. He'd make fun of me for being autistic and bipolar. He would do or say things to purposefully provoke me. He would say, "I wish you would hit me, fight me, what's up?" Thing is, I never challenged him to a fight. I'd defend myself from further injury and he would tell everyone that I hit him, that I started a fight with him. Keep in mind, I was a 5'5", 120-pound girl. He would physically abuse me. He'd punch and slap me in the face, shove me against walls. He'd thrown things at me. He told me that he wishes my attempt succeeded. Oh my goodness me. He would always exclude me from family outings and going out places. I was excluded from everything. I got awards from an art show and he claimed that I was showing off and was angry that I was trying to hang them up inside my bedroom and demanded that instead I throw them away. He was upset because I had awards and my sister didn't. He told me that it's not fair that I'm rubbing those awards in her face because she didn't win any. My sister was his favourite. Anything she wanted, she got. I was stuck with old clothes that didn't fit, while my sister got new books, new makeup, new clothes, new shoes, you name it. She was the golden child. I was forgotten about. Every time I had plans with my mother, he'd force her to cancel them so she could go with him. She chose men over me. Now, I had a daughter in February. I love her so much and I want to protect her. My mother asked when I would let him see the baby. I made it clear that wasn't happening. He's angry that I won't let him see her. He said to my mum, "If I can't see her, then nobody else can." Oh my god, that is so scary. It's not fair that she's excluding me when I provided food, clothes, and a roof over her head. She owes me. She was a difficult child to raise. Now, I wasn't difficult. I had mental issues that weren't taken seriously or diagnosed. I went through a lot of trauma that my family denied even happening. My stepdad went on Facebook and talked about how I'm excluding him and that I'm an ungrateful brat. He had family reaching out to me to get over the trashy things that he'd done. He'll never see my daughter though. He will never see me again. He is cut out of my life forever.